Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 14. Something I have to keep in mind is that we are doing seasons, and I want to make sure that we plan those appropriately. And as Half Res approaches, which is a conference that I help run in Chicago, as that approaches, I need to take a break and be able to focus on all these external projects. So there will end up being a break along that time. We'll figure that out when it gets there, but just want to put it out there that that is still a thing. So I think it's going to be like we'll live stream 10 months out of the year for the main regular Rocket Lasso Live episodes. And then we'll do a consistent amount on the other 10 months of the year. So that should be fun. So we've already got a bunch of people in the chat. We got a couple of links coming in. And why don't we just go ahead and see what we've got going. Let me share the screen. That's a different project I'm working on. And let's click on a link we got here. Boom. Let's see. Thank you for popping up in the wrong window. Ooh. I'm assuming you're just meaning this little indentation that's happening on this website. So Field.io Project IBM. That's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. That's there's almost like a very specific type of plastic. Yeah, look at that. So that's kind of like the opposite. You can see it upside down. I'm trying to see what this is. I mean, it seems to be an IBM thing. Or Field.io, is this an artwork strategy? I'm trying to figure out, I mean, this might just be the company and this is their webpage and they show stuff, but I'm assuming you're talking about doing these cool little motions through here. So that is neat. Artworks, I just want to see if I'm properly seeing it. Yeah, this seems to be a studio. So Field Studio, I'm assuming. Studio. A creative studio specializing in art and technology. That's my favorite combination of things. All right, well, let's go ahead with the assumption that we are looking at, I'm going to hit back a few times there, that we are looking at this little drawing on animation. Potentially tricky. Let me think. I'm trying to think of what the most straightforward way of doing it might be. Oh, I'm in the wrong layout here. I was doing some motion tracking, so let me go to the startup layout. Boom. All right. Now, what would be good would be just being able to draw some splines and animating those splines on. It turns into how are those splines combining with the rest of the object. That's the challenging part here. I'm trying to think if there's a really clean... Excuse me, kind of got some hiccups. I wonder if we could do this with some proximal and some remapping. That would be really cool if we could do it that way. So we can do it with some bump or some displacement depending on the context. Let's try and do it with some displacement. We'll keep the scene relatively simple. I'm going to change my view mode here, NB being the shortcut, so we can see some polygons. Let's go ahead and just subdivide this a bunch more times for our base. And we're going to do it as... subdivisions as subpoly subdivisions after the fact for the render, but you could always use a displacer object if you wanted it to be in the viewport. And let's go ahead and make a new material. Let's apply it. I think it's a good idea to do it via a material, even if we were doing a displacer. But in any case, let's try and do it just in the luminous channel, and then we'll transfer it over to the displacement after we are seeing the effect, because no need to compound problems. So what I would like to do is make a proximal, and we are going to create a spline of some sort. Why don't we make a helix? I'm going to lay the helix flat on the ground. Let's set the start radius down to 0 and the height down to 0, and I can see we got this nice spiral, nice simple straightforward thing to feed into our proximal. So let's go thump. And then we have to say, now right now if I were to render, I don't think we're going to see anything. Maybe just, yeah, there's a big circle in the middle. So it's really big. Let's drop it down to 10. So we get a smaller circle in the middle. And let's go ahead and turn on use vertices. Yep, okay, so using vertices, you can now see that we're getting a little dot every, every certain amount of space. In fact, it's a dot every a certain amount of distance on the helix. And we can change this from adaptive to uniform, and I think that this will be a little bit more even. Yeah. So there's a lot of points right now. It's subdividing a lot, but you see we get this nice solid line, and I don't think that takes too long to calculate. Currently, we are set to blend mode add. I think it would probably be a good idea to set it to lighten, because each of these little circles is adding on top of the next one, although this might not work. Oh, okay, it did. So you can see now that we got this nice little fall off. Now this is what I was hoping for. Right now we have linear. We could do something like set it to smooth, which is typically what I go for, and that's going to make it look a nice, you know, a nice amount of blurry there. But it actually might end up being linear that we want here, because my thought is let's go ahead and feed this proximal through a filter. So this nice little node filter. What's great about this is, well, not only can you hue, saturation, lightness, brightness, contrast, and gamma, but we can turn on gradient curves, and this is just like curves inside of Photoshop. So now we got this RGB curve, and now my hope is that we can arc this in such a way where we can get this really nice sharp pinch. So if you imagine us remapping that nice blurry curve to this sharp angle, well, let's see if I did it right. Yeah, it seems to be. Now it seems like we need more dots here. We need more subdivisions in the way. But you see it gets really tall in the middle and the rest is really subtle. That's the hope here anyway. Now, do I still have our proximal? Yeah, it's still in linear. And you can now see that we get these little, we're now seeing the individual circles. So we need to subdivide more our spline. We need more points in order to subdivide this more to make it look a little bit smoother. So let's go ahead back to our helix, and we can increase our subdivision count here directly or change our intermediate points. Let's go ahead and double our subdivisions, and that should make there hopefully be twice as many, although this seems to be uniform and maybe that changes it. So I'm going to jump it up to 10, but I don't think this is exponential. I think it's a set amount. So yeah, we probably need to jump this up to doubling the amount. So let's say 20. Seems to be working. I'm having trouble visually seeing it, so I'm going to jump it up to a much bigger number. Okay, so you can see I jumped up to 55, and now, but this is what's interesting, is all we have is a spline and a plane, and look how long this is taking to render. There's a lot of calculations taking place. Now, that's not too bad, but look how long that took to render, and let's drop this down to 1 subdivision per point and hit render, and look how quick it goes. So that by itself is adding a lot of calculations, a lot of render time, so definitely something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and go and jump that back up to something big. I mean, 55 is just a guess I did. Let's keep going smaller. I guess it starts looking a little chunky right around there. So that might be our limit, because we're going to be doing subdivision surface as well. Although we could feed this into a bump. And it's worth doing this into the bump. Let's give this a try and see if it looks any good in the bump. So we've got that channel. Let's go ahead and copy our shader, turn off luminance, go into bump. Paste it into there, turn on color channel, make that white, and this will show up better if we have a light and probably some specular going. I scoot the light off to the side, pull it up into the air, and yeah, there we go. So we're not going to get a preview of it, but let's go ahead and just hit render and see if the bump is showing up at all. I'm not really seeing it, but the bump is pretty weak, and when you're doing, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you feed something like a gradient through your bump, that it's so incredibly subtle. So that is not necessarily wrong yet. So if we jump that up to 100, let's see if we see anything. We do see something. Yeah, actually, that's working surprisingly well. Let's go ahead. I mean, we can double that and start making it more blatant. So you can see that curvature there. Now, what I'm thinking is I went a little bit too sharp. Like we're getting that really sharp line in there. So let's go ahead into our filter and let's back off that super crazy one a little bit. Hit render. All right. Calmed it down a little bit, but I feel like we're seeing that shape okay. But I do feel like we have to keep pushing this further. Like it's not going as deep as I kind of want the effect to be. The problem is, look at these little, I'm not even sure what to make of these. You can see we're getting, there's almost some imperfections going on there. Is that just because we don't have enough subdivisions? Let's go ahead and test that by going back into, actually we just go into our spline, and let's do 50 points. And, oh, that's worse. Look at the dot, 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 dot. Although, you know, that it's worse, but it also might be very distance dependent. If we zoom out a little bit, that might be better. I mean, the effect is totally working. You see, we get this really nice curve in there. We have to have a really deep bump in order for it to start showing up, but it is there. So that's one method. Let's go ahead and try and do the subdivision method. There's not even a MIP value or a delta value in this. I don't think there's one anywhere. Yeah, there's no delta value. Let's try increasing our end distance. It's just going to make everything bigger. Yeah, so it makes that whole fall off bigger, and it might chill it out a little bit. And in fact, I think it kind of did. So it's chilling it out a little bit by making it bigger. And keep in mind, that's a larger curve. We can make this smaller. Keep in mind that this is going to make it very tiny. We're probably going to see a series of dots, but now it becomes a very tight pinch overall. So yeah, kind of a push and pull there. But the bigger value, let's go up to 20 to split the difference. The bigger value of 20 might chill out that really these little sharp dots down there. Now, something to keep in mind is we're going to want to animate this on. We're going to put it into displacement in a second, but this bump is working pretty well. Now we're going to want to animate this on, so keep in mind that we're probably going to need to spline wrap or use a matrix or a Mo-spline. Let's try using a Mo-spline because I feel like it's a pretty cool technique that we don't get to do too often. I'm going to change our mode in the Mo-spline to a spline. And now we can go to the spline tab and I can feed it a different spline. And now that we're feeding it a different spline, I'm going to say that our spline here should be not the full shape, but just the line. That's all I want to see. Let's visually hide our original one. So now we're only seeing the Mo-spline, which is a little difficult to see. Let's go ahead and make our material darker. There we go. See our spline a little bit better. So we got our Mo-spline, but I think what's cool here is under the Object tab, we can grab our end distance, and I can start dragging this in, and you can see I'm actually drawing on the Mo-spline on top of it. But I think the important thing to note here is I think the Mo-spline, is it adapting the number of points? Actually, the point count disappeared. It says generation mode is based on the vertex, but we might be able to set count. Yeah, so here's a count, which is how many subdivisions we have. So we would need to put a lot of points here. Like by default, it seemed like we knew that we had 200 points, but then we had to crank it up 50 times. So I'm going to put this up to like 2,000. Let's try going into our material. In the material, let's swap out our helix spline for our Mo-spline. Let's see if that still renders. Indeed it does. And it seems pretty good. And we'd probably just have to keep on increasing. The Mo-spline doesn't have, like the helix, we have the intermediate points, but I don't think most splines do. Nope, 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 nope. Yeah, so we just have to straight up type in the number of points that we want, which is not a bad thing, I feel. Yeah, that's a more linear type of thing that we can get very, clean control over. But anyway, the point now is that's really easy for us to go and trace this on and get whatever motion and animation that we want to travel on. And of course, it's subdivided a lot more now, so there's a lot more tiny points in that section, I think. I'm not entirely sure if that's the way it works or not, but that is what we're going to go with. Let's go ahead and give this a quick save. And go into scene files. And I guess this would be a good time to mention that if you support Rocket Lasso on Patreon, then there's a tier where you get all of these scene files after the episode. So let's save this. I don't even know what to call this. Scratching plastic. Okay, so that is doing it via bump. Let's try creating... let's try doing it not with bump, but with displacement. We're probably going to need a lot of subdivisions here, but let's go into displacement. And I'm going to turn on sub-poly displacement. And honestly, that should be kind of all we need to do. Let's hit render and see what happens. Oh, wow, not too bad. Okay, so it's backwards, obviously, so we need to flip that. And it's set to centered, so our black is pushing down and the white is pushing up. Presumably, we wouldn't want that. So what we could do is grab this black point and move it up to 50%, would be maybe a straightforward way. So it should be outputting gray to white. And a good idea would also be to make this very precisely up on point Y, 0.5 by twirling down our little twirly thing here. Alrighty, let's go ahead and hit render on that. Hopefully the curve still works okay. Okay, so it's still pushing up. That's fine because we will switch that into displacement. I'm going to say a -5 instead of 5. Honestly, 5 is probably too much. Let's go more subtle, like 2. And push it down. And yeah, that's working pretty well as well. So we do it, and the reason we did that on the bump first, in fact, the luminance channel first, was that now we're going to be fighting both to have enough points on our spline and to be having enough subdivisions in our displacement, because maybe 4 might be too much for what we have. So you can see I can lower it down and I columns it down a little bit, and depending on the distance, I think that might be fine. Like that might look good from this distance, but you'll see if I zoom way up, and we take a look at it, that we're going to start seeing there's not quite enough resolution there. So yeah, a little push and pull on that. We got to decide exactly what we like. But yeah, going to 4 looks better. If we go to 5, it should look even better. And it's just a trade-off of processing and render time. So yeah, going to 5, now it's incredibly detailed. And now I think it's actually gotten to the point where we can see the little individual points being generated by our mouse spline. So, you know, depending on what you're doing, it could be fine. Let's go ahead and double that number of points. It's going to be getting incredibly detailed. And yeah, I don't have an easy solution for you there. So it's going to take longer to calculate both that, so both the mouse spline and to generate the proximal. So pretty much the proximal and the subpoly displacement. But that's pretty sharp looking now, and we could easily draw that on. We're getting the nice shading going, lighter side, darker side, looking good. All right, so that is sort of method 2. Let's give that a save. Now, something I'm curious about. I'm going to turn off displacement. Let's turn off color. I never, ever, ever use this, but if we go to the spline, can you feed in a spline? No, it looks like, okay, so you can feed in a line texture here, but I thought maybe the shader. We're in a shader, a spline shader, but you can just type out text. I never use this one because it's really clunky, but I thought maybe we could type something in, or you know, drag a spline in, but it does not look like that is the case, so that is a dead end. Now, the last method that is jumping to mind here would be, let's not use any displacement at all. Let's not use any bump. Let's try and do it more physically with the new volume stuff. So let's go ahead and create a cube here. I'm going to make the cube 5 units tall. I mean, the bigger we make it, the longer it's going to take to calculate, so I'm going to leave it there. Let's go ahead and take our original helix. I'm going to move it 5 units up into the air, so it's actually right on the ground, which will automatically move up the mouse spline because it's following it. We do not need our plane object, but what we do need is some sort of shape to be taking a bite out of this. So let's go ahead and grab, I want to grab like this chrysoid, crisoid? I thought there was an R in it, but there's not. But you can see it's giving us pretty much exactly the shape that we want. Unfortunately, there's no way to close it, so we just have to make that editable and then say close. Cool. And let's go ahead and it's obviously a huge T for scale it way down. I do like that's pivoting right here from the bottom point. So that could mean we just shrink our spline in to do the effect. Being very precise with the height here would probably be a good idea. So making it exactly, they're going to scale kind of arbitrarily. We're going to set this to 5 and 10. There we go. So now it's exactly 5 units tall, which means we can actually take our helix spline. I kind of like seeing it there. So what I'm going to actually move my pivot up to the top, which probably means moving it up 5 units. Axis object mode, turn on the axis tool. Type in 5, boop. Hopefully that jumps up 5 units. Oh, I did on the mouse spline. Oops. Do it on the cissoid. Go to 5 units tall. Boom. And now you can see we're pivoting from the top, which means our spline can be right on the surface of our object, and this will dig inside of it. Now, I think it's going to probably dig too far down, so I'm going to make our object 10 tall, and then we'll subtract minus 5 to lay that flat on the ground, and we can put our helix back on the ground, just zero everything out. All right, cool. Now, I guess I was going to say volumes, but we might be able to just use a simple bool here if we just do a nice straightforward sweep. We'll feed that through the mouse spline so we can animate it. All right, interesting. Oh yeah, we don't need nearly as many subdivisions, so let's chill that out. Wow, there's a lot of subdivisions on there. Let's do 300. Should be. Actually, I guess 300 is a little low. We'll do 1,000. And let's grab the cissoid and tell it to chill out. That's way too many subdivisions. None? Ooh, interesting. Interesting. I'm telling it to... it seems that it's made of a lot of points. Oh yeah, look at that. It's very, very, very subdivided when you make that object editable. So it gives us a very high poly count overall, which is interesting. But in any case, it is rotated the wrong orientation. We could fix it multiple ways, but I think the easiest way is just going to be to rotate our axis. There we go, 90 degrees, and now we've got that little shape poking down into the ground, and now we can just bool it out is one option. So let's create a bool object, throw in our cube as the first object, so it should be defaulting to A subtract B. Now this is sunk into the ground a little bit, so I'm going to move our helix 1 unit up into the air, so it's actually moved up, and it is, it's being weird. It's being real weird. If we turn off our bool, we should see that we are getting a very... Oh, what? I only moved it 1 unit up into the air. Bizarre. Well, I'm just going to eyeball it then. Let's move it up just a couple of ticks. And it's very, very tiny. Well, that's strange. I don't know why that scale suddenly got so small. I thought it was 5 units tall. Moving up 1 should be very small. Well, let's try turning our bool back on. There we go. Now you can see we've got this nice trough getting dug out from it. I mean, that's cool looking automatically. Like, look at that. Pretty nice. Depending on what you're doing with your geometry, you can get pops, and you never know exactly what you're going to get from that. You see if I turn on our subdivisions, then you can see all these extra little, subdivisions being created. It is helpful to go into your bool and say, hide new edges, and then it's going to turn that into an n-gon, but that can give you trouble. There are circumstances in which it gives you trouble. The cissoid, sheer number of subdivisions on that is bugging me a little bit. But I want to see how quickly this refreshes, so let's try dragging this back. Actually, this is incredibly fast. That's pretty good. So if we wanted to do it, we can start at 0, keyframe that. Let's go to the end. I'm not sure how far we want it to go. I'm going to drag it out to about there. And now we should be able to just hit play. And you see I'm getting almost real-time feedback on that. It's about, as it goes further, it starts taking longer and longer. But that's working pretty well. Now, you can see that the curve is not perfect. And I think it's going to be, camera is a little bit of a pain to navigate here. It's zipping all over the place. Yeah, if I try and rotate, I just disappear. So the helix spline, I think, needs to just be barely poking up above the surface. I'm going to do 0.001, the smallest number Cinema 4D can do, and that's closer to being level on the overall shape. And then we can also keep in mind we can grab the cissoid, hit. Yeah, look how small I got. Oh, I know it got so tiny. It's the Mo spline, the freaking Mo spline. I thought I'd change it to a line, but apparently it's still bringing its own thickness. Yeah, you can see it's bringing a Mo spline brings its own width with it. And you see it's a width of 1, which is why it looked exactly 1 when I moved it up. Change that to a width of 5, and we should be back to what I originally thought we were going to get. There we go. So once again, it'd be good to get rid of some of the subdivisions inside of it, but that's working pretty well. And if I were to scale this on Y, it's actually going to be, oh no, it might not be on Y because of the rotation it ends up doing. No, it can't be X, is it? Well, I'm going to turn off the sweep for a second, and let's take a look at our shape. So yeah, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to scale it like that. So you see it's getting more shallow, which means it should be more level on the edge as it curves to the edge. And let's see if that levels itself out a little bit. It looks like the Mo spline is choosing that as the radius it was driving, so I'm just going to shrink it via the Mo spline. So there we go. So now it's a lot more shallow, and the hope here being is if I hit NA that these are going to smoothly curve into each other. I do have to say though, well, these are 2 different colors, so let's pull that off. There we go. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty good. Look at that super sharp line that we're getting. And we want to hit play, and it's working pretty well. Although I will say, look at that. There's a couple frames here I saw right there. Look, it's having some problems with the calculating the Phong right there. So there's some Boolean trouble right there. In fact, it's not even generating that polygon. It's a missing polygon. So there's definitely the old Boolean trouble. And I'm trying to think. I mean, you can always turn on create single object, which didn't help at all. You can turn off the hide edges. Honestly, sometimes that hurts instead of helps. So let's see if that can play through not hiding them. It makes messier geometry, but you can see it actually seems to have succeeded all the way through there without creating any problems. So just something to keep in mind. Slowing down as we do more of a bool, but yeah, that's pretty quick, and it looks pretty nice. I mean, it's a pretty neat effect. I like the the subtlety of it. And then I'm inclined to not do it because of the incredible subdivision and the fact that this method worked so well. I did not think the Boolean option would work that well. The last method would be converting these to volumes. So we could create a volume builder and a volume mesher. In the volume builder, let's put the cube, and then we will also feed the sweep. And we can go into the volume builder, and I could say subtract. Hang on. Excuse me. So you can already see we got these really, really, really big cards, and this is going to need to have a lot more resolution. I'm going to drop it down to 2. And A subtract B. It seems to be wanting, I might need to pull this up a little bit more to see it. Yeah. So you can see the shape starts emerging. We can put that into a volume mesher, and you see that we then get the shape, which is all well and good, but in order to start getting resolution, so it actually starts looking good, we're going to have to increase it and increase it. I'm going to go and by increasing, I mean shrinking our voxel size. And every time we cut this number in half, we're creating, it's cubed, so it's, cut that in half, it means you're doubling the volume on X and on Y and on Z. So it's cubed for the number of calculations it needs to do. So you can see that this is indeed working, and it looks okay, and I think it's calculating. Let's hit play. Okay, obviously way slower than our bool, not looking as nice as our bool, but then you do get some of the options where we could, first of all, shrink that again, but we can also do, it's going to slow us down more, but we can create a smoothing layer on top of it and smooth it to whatever degree we think would make that look nice, and we might be able to get a nicer transition onto the ground plane. But yeah, so that's another method that you can do on that one. So those are the 4 different ways I could think to do that method. Oh, also, if we were to go to the sweep option, which was working well, I think the bool automatically, oh no, it didn't, is create a Phong break at intersections. I thought that was turned on by default, but it's not. So with any luck, it's actually trying to smooth out this surface. And I'm not sure if the Phong properly works there, but what I would do is probably put that into a connect object. Let's not weld it, although I'm not sure if those are being created as a single object. I'm going to turn on create single object, and then the bool could probably do the transition. If we go to our connect object, I'm going to say manual, and then we could put a Phong tag on it. And yeah, that Phong tag should control it. So this, in theory, should be Phonging smoothly from one shape to the other. So I don't know if that connect is actually necessary. You might be able to do it just directly in the bool without the connect. And if you're creating a single object, then, you know, that's one poly, they're connected, they're welded in. So, yeah. Okay, well, that should cover that one. Thanks for the question. Relatively, I mean, visually kind of straightforward, you know, conceptually, if you think about what we're seeing here. But being able to actually go and build it with 4 different methods, I think is pretty cool. Hey, Bob, how's it going? Level Bevel. Paul, thanks, everybody, for coming hanging out. Yada glow. But we've got a question from PCAT. Would love to see your technique for this weird core / Aphex Twin extruded landscape look. Okay, I have no idea what we're going to see here. Let's take a look. Why is it loading Twitter? Oh, I guess there's a link to Twitter. Whoa, okay. Well, first of all, it's compressed really, really deeply. Oop, and there's audio. Let me turn that off. I mean, okay, well, visually, oh, okay. All right, interesting, neat. Okay, I don't see anything insane here. This is for Aphex Twin, although I'm not, you know, like, we don't know the artist, but hopefully Aphex Twin is good enough for that. I'm trying to think of material-wise. I guess we could do entirely parametrically. I was thinking about popping open something like CityKit and pulling a height map out from it. But why don't we just build that completely from scratch? Let's go ahead and create a plane, and let's give ourselves lots of subdivisions here. I'm going to create a if we're only going in one direction, it's supposed to be calculate slightly faster if we use a MoGraph plane effector than a displacer. A displacer is doing more calculations. So if we put in a plane effector and we say to deform points on Z, so that should push, okay, that's a little much. Let's say 100. So this is now pushing all the points upward. So it's just like a displacer, but in one orientation. Cool. Now we need to go to our fall off and feed it some different materials. So I think our best bet is making a material, applying it to our plane, going to our plane effector here, and we're going to create a shader field. And the shader field, we're going to click on the shader field, and I'm going to say to look at, let's say, the luminance channel of this material. And now we can control it via this material. So we can turn on luminance, and let's go ahead and take a look. In fact, you know what I'm probably going to do is make a second material, apply it to our object, so we are seeing the results of what we feed into the luminance channel. But we don't have to see via displacement, but we are not going to see it as a material. So inside of here, we can have a lot of fun going into a layer shader and starting to layer up some different noises. So let's make a noise, and we are going to be using a series of cell noises. Now our subdivisions are going to determine kind of how sharp the angle falls, but I'm just gonna go with it. So that's one level. Let's go ahead and make a duplicate of it, and we're going to make this one way bigger. Let's say 500. And I guess we should start big and then go smaller, so we can do like that. We could also say overlay. Yeah, overlay is cool. And let's do another one. This one, let's do 3 times as big. So let's see what just that one does. Hopefully it's not. Okay, so nice and big. And then we can overlay on top of that and get something like this. And then we can go to this layer and say noise, and it's going to overlay on top of that. And I guess it depends. We don't want to peak the colors as we're overlaying, so I might actually lower the contrast down a little bit because we don't want these ever to peak. So we're going to be a little bit more in the middle range just by pulling that down a little. Yeah, it just gives more options for these to push up and down. Awesome. And that, yeah, so this means now when I go to this final building, I can really crank up the contrast and get more of an overall effect. So you'd end up with something like this. So boom, whatever, that's our city. We could, there's no good way of doing some fall off here. I wish we could pixel by pixel create a fall off, but based on the way we're doing this, it's not going to do anything. What we could do is, I think we could probably copy this entire shader into our colorful material here, or into our normal material, paste that, and I think it'll actually colorize our buildings pretty well. Maybe not. Let me see. Oh, well, okay, what we see here is very different from what we see here. I guess we'd have to generate 2-dimensional materials for that to be the case. Or we have to stick the texture. That might work, actually. If we add a Cinema 4D stick texture tag, I can hit record, although I don't think you have to. And now if I put the deformer on it, let's see if those match better. I think they do match better now. The problem being is you see that these lower buildings are, you know, they're lower, so they're darker. The lighter ones are pushed up more, which makes sense. But we would probably want to go into this new layer shader here and gradient map it maybe a few times to a, let's create a, not there, let's grab the effect. And we'll go, let's try a posterizer, yeah. And then put a couple levels in there, no width. Let's see. And it does something. But what I really wanted to do was add in, before the posterizer actually, let's add in a colorizer. And now we could recolor this so that they're they're not just limited to the same mapping that they had originally. So I'm going to double my knots and then distribute them, and now we should have, you know, dark ones on top and light ones on the bottom, just a little more variation. Honestly, it does not look all that great, gotta tell you. We'd want, I still think the entire thing is generated via some sort of displacement, but the actual geometry we're getting out from this is not as nice looking as I wanted. I'd really like it to fade off on the edge, but it's gonna cut the buildings off in a non-geometric way. It's really tricky. Let me think. Is there anything that we can do to make this look better? Because it's not great. We could make actual geometry and do extrusions on an individual basis and actually make a little bit of a city and then heavily subdivide it, which would maybe be weird. Keeping it all kind of in this material world, I think, is a good thing. And if we want to make it look better, we can always just subdivide it even more. And the more we subdivide, the more that these materials are going to match the geometry. Even see just by doubling the polygon count, everything is matching a lot better than it had been. And then I wonder if we could do some sort of like adding windows. Let me name these. This one is the surface. This one is the displace. I wonder if we could make windows on there. But they'd have to be projected. Oh yeah, we could apply it cubically. I'm just worried if the stick texture tag would affect it. So let's see. Let's do the super duper duper basic, most basic kind, which is going to be probably a layer shader. Inside the layer shader, I'm going to put a effect. No, it's a surface tiles. So like I said, the simplest possible one, and we can make some white windows, and they can go all the way to black, and then I guess a middle gray. And we can say randomize, and then we can change our grout width a little bit to, yeah, there we go. Get a little sharper. Okay, so those are our windows, and it's randomly any given color. And we can go ahead and apply this overall. And with any luck, we can set this to cubic and tile it a bunch of times. So let's say tile 10 times. And let's see if the stick texture tag is going. Oh yeah, the stick texture tag is screwing us over a little bit. Is there any way to limit stick texture? I didn't want to make anything editable, but we can't put the second material on there. So that is applying that way. Now if we alpha'd it, no, you can't, because it's deforming the UVs. My thought would be, oh yeah, this wouldn't work at all. Unless, I really don't know. I'm going to put this into a connect object, and if we were to move the materials onto the connect, don't weld. What's happening there? Because that should lock the UVW, and then that should get transferred to this object. And if we apply this material, that should look completely different. But I feel like we're still seeing this original material. Right now it's saying textures. I'm gonna say no textures. Oh, okay, that seems to sort of work. Now let's see if that one projected properly. Yeah, it's projecting properly. And now we put on this new one, and now we'll tile it 10 by 10. Oh, it's still set to UV. Let's set that to cubic. Oh, I guess, this is weird. Because why aren't the edges? The edges aren't getting materials applied. But this is just set to cubic, and it's not limited to anything. I mean, what I fed through the connect object is strange. I will feeding that through the material that way is strange, but it's interesting. Yeah, Mr. Matt Dog is saying perhaps a projection shader. I was thinking about that, but that typically, I don't think that would actually work in this case. I don't think. It's behaving, the connect object's behaving exactly as if we had left it on the original object. I mean, it'd be kind of neat to get the windows on there. I know we're spending a little bit more detail on it than we should for what we're going to get out of it. One thought is if we go into our original layer shader, if we go into our layer shader here on our displace material, if we go and we change our noise types from texture to 2D, and it's probably going to change the scale dramatically. But if we put those all to 2D materials, yeah, so it made them all much bigger, so we'd have to shrink them all. So we'd have to go to 10. 10 is very tiny. 20. Better. 50. 40. All right, 40%. So I'm going to go to 40% of the scale that they are times 0.4 and scale, global scale times 0.4. All right, now it is kind of the same idea, but it's a two-dimensional texture. So now we can go and copy our layer shader, go into our surface projection, and inside of our color, we've got this layer shader, but I'm going to paste the layer shader I had into this one. So instead of having the three materials, we just have them embedded inside of that layer shader. And it should give us the same kind of result. And now those materials are being applied two-dimensionally from the top, which means we don't need the stick texture tag anymore. So now you see it should just be sticking on there quite accurately, which now means we should be free to apply this material, set it to cubic, and with any luck, okay, weird. Maybe our light just needs to be over further. Yeah, look at that. So there we go. Now we're finally getting some of those projecting off to the side, which is, that's fine. It's working well. If we wanted to bother to take the time, well, now we got that working. We're just having some fun here, hopefully. So let's copy that shader into the alpha channel. I'm going to paste it in there, and now we're going to colorize. It's already getting colorized, which is, oh, this is supposed to be the, did I just turn on, yeah, sorry, I did that in the wrong material. I want to do that inside the windows. Cool, so we got some windows in there. Let's go and turn on alpha, and that we want to copy our color channel into our alpha. So now it should be alpha-ing those out. But now we can go inside of here, and I'm going to make another colorizer, an effect colorizer. And I want this to go from white to black. And essentially what I want to do is crank this up so high, so freaking close here, that any window is going to get blacked out, and everything else is going to be there. So, I mean, I could modify the material, but now those windows should be getting alpha'd out, and now we can see the underlying building color underneath. We also have to turn off image alpha. There we go. So you can see that we should be seeing the individual windows on top of different colored buildings. So, okay, that's neat. And then we have windows on the rooftops. We don't want that. Let's go back into our alpha channel, and let's create a fall off material. So let's create a, where do we got that? Surface, probably gotta be effects, right? Fall off, yeah. So we got this fall off, and I'm gonna set it from black to white, right here, black to white. And we've got this fall off traveling along Y, which should mean that we need the opposite. So I'm going to invert our direction, Y minus, and now you can see the bottom is visible and not the top. So if I hit render right now, yeah, the building, you see the roof doesn't have it anymore, and the sides of the building are at 50% because they are half of the Y dimension. Like they're kind of splitting the difference because they're vertical. So all we have to do is clamp the white part up here, And now, as long as as long as I'm anywhere above 50%, then those should be fully visible, and the roof doesn't have it. So there we go. Windows on all the sides, randomly alphaed out. They're perfectly alphaed out, and now they have the different colors. And now inside of the window material, we could go, and honestly, the color shouldn't be anything. Honestly, we don't need color at all, but we do want to copy this over to the luminance channel if we're going to make this nighttime. Into the luminance channel, let's also, we could make them reflective if we want to. So let's go ahead and remove that basic layer and add a GGX so they're nice and shiny. Let's go no roughness, no specular, easy on the, like just a little bit reflective. And we'll go into the lumens channel, and let's make sure that that is indeed, do we need to make that additive? I'm going to set this to add. Nope. Does it need a Fresnel? What do we do to make those additive? There we go. I had to change the attenuation from whatever the default was to additive because I want the reflection to add on top of whatever is happening on the other channels. So you can see that these are reflective, and they're going to be reflective on top of whatever we feed into this luminance channel. So in the luminance channel, we can go ahead and colorize this somehow. So these are going to be purely random, but it would be kind of neat to show you how we could do some additional layers, but they won't be offset the way CityKit does. I built a lot of the CityKit materials this way. But anyway, let's make a colorizer and just make some window colors here. So I think we're going to start with black, and we want lots of the windows to not be illuminated. And then we can have some windows be yellow, and we'll have some windows be orange. And we'll have some windows be maybe a light blue. And let's have some windows be white. In addition to that, we probably would want, I'm going to copy the yellow color over. And then let's copy this white color over so we can also get a transition from white, from yellow to white, from blue to white. And then let's get a copy of the orange one there as well. And let's see. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. And now let's just distribute these in whatever order we want them to appear. Like I said, most windows are going to be black, but now you can see how we're randomly colorizing each of the different windows. And let's hit render there. And there we go. Now we have differently colored windows. Very nice. And I mean, honestly, we probably want more of them to be black. Let's grab that yellow and scoot it over. Yeah, we don't want to go overboard. So now you can see you get different reflective windows. And then honestly, even this reflection, like this, this never ends in the way these are reflective. I guess it's set to cubic, so we can't overlay them. Well, that's set to additive. Oh, that's interesting because it's reflective. Really, I just want the windows to be reflective. So instead of setting the attenuation to additive, what was it before, average? We probably just want to set it to, oh, that's interesting. I thought that the alpha, you can see that they're completely reflective. We're not seeing through to this alpha channel. And I don't want to lose the color of the buildings. So that's interesting. Oh, and you know what? I turned on this fall off. That might be the problem, actually. I turned on the fall off, but I forgot to set that to screen. So now, nope, multiply. Set that to multiply. There we go. Now we're seeing the buildings underneath. And now if we turn on reflection, there we go. Now they're just the windows are reflective. We can see the building color underneath. And then we can set that to additive. All right, that's what I was missing. So now we see we got random windows. They're darkened out or they are illuminated, and we have different color buildings. And of course, once again, the more that we subdivide our original plane, the more that we're not going to transition between them. But of course, we're paying the price for subdivisions with it being slower. But this should be pretty detailed. Some of them are transitioning, but anyway, we got a terrible looking city here. And based off of that, getting actually more to the question, let's give this a quick save. Number 2A. I'm not even sure what to call it. Building dance. All right, so assuming that there's some sort of beat or music that's going to be playing that's supposed to be displacing these up and down to their varying degrees, all of our additional motion is going to be controlled via this plane effector, this deformer. Now we could do multiple deformations potentially, where we've got our nice city here, and maybe the city by itself is supposed to be doing some sort of animation. So we've got our displacing material, and we could have that be animated somehow. I'm not sure exactly the way I'd want to vary these, because you can put an animation speed in here, but that is going to be they're just going to melt around. They're just going to be lobbing around. Let me think. How would I want these to progress? I guess we could just move it in space, really, couldn't we? If I grab our displacement material here and I offset it in Y, does it update the material? Well, they're two-dimensional now. I forgot we have to make them two-dimensional. I mean, obviously, just the thing we could do is just give them some animation speed. We can just go into this one and say, okay, animation speed 1. And now, I don't know how slow it's going to be. It's not animating at all. We might need to go into our shader field and turn on frame. There we go. So now, as I frame forward, oh yeah, that's also the way the cell noise works. Wow, there's a lot of very, very, very specific details here. I think that the cell noise animates in such a way where it's not constantly transitioning. It only jumps at a certain time. So that already is not animating the way I want it to. So I'm going to put that back down to 0. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways within just the fall off here, within the fields, that we could add on different, like, quantizes. Let's try putting a quantize on there. That might be interesting. So as we change our steps here, you can see that we're going to get different layers of buildings. Like, how many layers of buildings can we have? That's what the quantize is going to do for us. Instead of that, we could do a curve. We could. There's also formula, which might be interesting, where you could do the, oh man, it's not a sine wave, or maybe it is a sine wave. It's the subfield plus d, which is time. Like that. Is that going to offset? Let's see, what is d? D here is just time. So is that going to do what I think it should? Seemingly not. Of course, I have a bad equation in there. Hello. Oh my. Well, it's doing something. Whoa, funky. Yeah, there's motion in there, but everything's so slow. I'm gonna have to drop the point count way down. It's gonna be real low poly, but now we can at least hit play. Yeah, so it is creating some motion in there, but not the way I thought. There's a Tim Clapham had done a thing with the formula. I thought it was just sine wave subfields plus d, which is time, which would loop through all the different colors. And maybe this is the case. Maybe we just need time to be faster. So I go down here to delta time and say be 1,000 times faster. And now you can see these are looping around. Let's have them, or be 10 times faster again. So these would, okay, it's just sine waving around. If we just do that, it's going to animate them all upward. Yeah, interesting. Modulo them, perhaps? I don't know. There's a lot of goofy things we can do with formula. But anyway, I just wanted to make those randomly moving. It's not even a super important variable here. I just thought it'd be cool if we could get the buildings to be doing some sort of action on the beat. And the way that the colorizer is set up is just not working as well as I would want it to. What's noise remap? I don't even know. Well, that's funky. But does it have an offset? Oh yeah, look at that. Bump, 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 bump. So this offset actually has more of what I wanted, which is like we're offsetting in time. So I have an offset that I could control. and it's going to create different effects at different times. So right there, it's kind of interesting on the overall layout. So it gives us something to work with. I haven't ever played with the noise remap. I should look up what that does. But we're going to be, if we're going to want to play this to any kind of music or beat, then obviously we're going to be doing Signal. So I'm going to be grabbing Signal from Grayscale Gorilla. It's a plugin that they make that I designed, and I'm going to go ahead and create, what do I want to control? I want to control the offset of it. So now, let's see, I'm not even sure if, oh, this version of Signal might not be able to get into subfields like that. Let's see. Oh, cool, it can. I didn't know if it would or not. Okay, so instead, I'm going to max that out so it doesn't ever animate. And anyway, I just wanted to create a BPM here, which is beats per minute. And I'm going to say that I'm going to do an additive beats per minute. And it's going to have a variation of, I don't know, 5. Nope, too much. 1. There we go. Boom. Boom, boom. And then you see we're getting this looping animation. But if we go to our splines, then I can say that I want this to progress upward. So then every beat, it's going to suddenly jump to the next position. We give it a little bit of a transition here. Vroom, 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 vroom. And it's going to keep on progressing forever based on this beat. And then we could break up the beats apart here. So it could be like small beat, bigger beat. Beat, beat, beating, beating, beating. Okay, so that's, we're running 120 beats per minute here. And then we've got our spline field, which is cool, or our shader field. So what I would want to do is create a second shader field to do some of this crazy depth stuff. And if we wanted to, we can just duplicate this displace material in the shader field. I'm going to tell it to view the second material, and inside our second displace material, we're going to keep this real simple. Let's go ahead and add in a noise. Let's add in some sort of, yeah, a nice knocky. Let's make it real big, a little heavier contrast. And now inside of our plane effector, we can add in the second shader field. And the second shader field, you can see, is like this city-looking thing. It's complete, or this mountainous-looking thing. You can see it's completely overridden the city underneath of it. But if we set this to, let's say, subtract, then it's just subtracting from, or screen, yeah. So it's pulling from it, but we could say subtract specifically. And you can see where it's erasing out parts of the city. But if we turn off clamp, that should maintain the city the entire time, and we're able to now have the fall off of one add to the other. So instead of them both being inside of the noise, we can have them be separate like this. And based on that, I'm pretty sure we could go into our effector here, and I'm going to make a folder, and let's hit undo. I actually want the folder to be on the second shader field. And we could do things like put a quantize on there. So let's go and make that quantize again. Boom. And that should be, yeah, look at that. We're starting to get these different levels going. So that's a little bit more in the theme of what they had. But that's with this quantize on top of the shader field. And honestly, I think it'd be nice to visually see this a little calmer. So okay, so okay, so inside of the plane effector, we have our quantize, which is not turned on. If we turn that on, we get very mechanical looking thing, which is cool. But what I want to do is put in a spherical field as well. Yeah, we'll do a spherical field. I'm going to increase that to be most of it. And let's shrink this so it's part of it. Like it's a full transition. And then we can put that inside of the folder as well. And I'm going to say, I'm not sure, multiply. So now you can see that effect is only happening in the middle, and then we quantize that, and we're going to get different levels based on that section. So that is pretty cool. And then we set this entire folder, yeah, right now our shader field is set to normal. Let's change, our shader field was on subtract. Let's set that back to normal. And we can set our folder to subtract. So now we're subtracting from the city, and now you can see we start getting this pit inside of the overall city instead. We can go into, let's see, remapping. Okay, we can go into the remapper inside of our second shader field, and we can make this a lot stronger. I could say this is like 300%, so it should start going deeper. Yeah, so now we get a deeper pit in the middle. And now that's working pretty well. We can go into this one, and also make the strength be 300%. Yeah, now we're going to start getting these really deep pits in the middle based on a combination of the noise and the spherical field inside of it. And that is all subtracting. And we can always pull the power back on that, so we can do it a little bit or a lot. But now it should be kind of maintaining the building look overall while doing all of these other materials. So let's go ahead and pull that off and take a look at what we've got here. And now we can see, we've just kind of got this set pit down there, and the only motion is the other one. But now we could progress our noise or our offset and do lots of different things via our second shader field or the noise. So my thought here would be, let's calm that down again. We could go into our second shader field, and we've got the material applied in the shader field. Are we using a... Yeah, we're directly using this noise, and it's a 3D noise again, which I think means if I pause it, if we grab the material that's applied here, if I move it off on Y, I think it will move. Oh, no, it's not. I thought it would move. Does a scale affect it? Am I clicking on the right material? I don't think I am, actually. That's the material. Yeah, I was right. Okay, so if I grab the actual displacement material, I can offset this in space, and it's going to move it based on that. Now, I might want to go inside that second displacement material, make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit more distinct. I say 2000. Let's crank up that contrast more as well. And now, as the way this material is applied is offset, it's going to be animating itself. And then we could also drive that on a beat. So if we do copy the signal tag over, I can say I want to actually be controlling this material. Actually, I don't want to control that material. I want to control the tag here. So let's put it up here. I want to control the Y position of that tag. And yeah, now it's going to be offsetting, let's say 100 units every time the beat hits. So hit play, and now we should get big changes on that same beat. Boom, boom, boom. And those different stacked levels are being, of course, determined by that quantizer we fed in here. So we can have 4 levels, we'd have 2 levels, we could have more stepped levels, all of them layering up. And keep in mind that we dropped this to a low poly version here, so we can go and crank that up higher and change our display mode. And then this is what we actually end up with our really high poly version cranked up, which starts looking pretty cool, actually. So you can see how all of these little cliffs and everything get stacked up. So that's actually starts looking pretty neat again, which is good. I was wanting to make sure that looked somewhat okay. And so yeah, you end up with this layout. So we get all of this type of city going. Now it's not going to play very well, but we can go ahead and hit render. Let's see. Okay, that's what it looks like rendered. Let's go ahead and add in, and this is just vanilla cinema, but we can go and add in an environment. Why not? And let's enable some fog. Let's make it pretty thick. Let's go ahead and make it a cool color. Maybe some orange. Well, you gotta go pretty high there. Yeah, so start strengthening that up so we can get this really strong orange contrast. We could probably put some visible lights down there. We can actually light up our scene so that there would be some lighting in there. Grab our camera to a longer lens. Start stretching that out. Yeah, and that starts looking like something there. And I can safely hit play, but our frame rate's gonna be terrible. So you can see it's gonna be bopping up and down, but it's gonna be doing that based on the beat. So that is neat. None of that's animated. I'm kind of curious about these polygons scooting around. I'm not entirely sure about that, but keep in mind when I hit render that these rooftops will not have that material applied. It's only gonna be the rest of it. And yeah, it's something. All based around displacement. There's so many different methods we could go and try and tackle on that one, but I think that will wrap that one up. So I'll hit save on that one. And let's jump back into the chat. Actually, if anybody posted any questions, it would be great to jump it back here to the end. Some people are just having conversations there. Mr. Mad Dog asking if it could have been done with hair. I like that idea. I like that idea a lot, actually. Why don't we take a quick look at that? Because, you know, I have the old pillar tutorial I made, and I'd be curious if we could do something similar. Let's go ahead and that's a really good idea. Hair, add hair. So if we were to generate polygon center, I'm creating one clone per center of polygon. I'm going to tell the hairs to generate as guides. So there's exactly as many guides as as many hairs as there are guides. We can go to generate and I say I don't want hairs, but I do want squares. And the squares are going to be based off of the thickness of the hairs. So we can go to thickness, and I'm not sure what number we need, so let's just drag that up. We can even put a little space between them now. So we do, let's do about 15 by 15. So we get that, and then we can go into our hair again. Let's see, advanced, start cap, end cap. Yes, we want end caps. We have a Fong tag, delete the Fong tag, so now we just end up with this. So we got a series of vertical pillars, which is really just like a sweep. It's really just like a swept object. And then we can control the height via length. So we can feed the length here. Now you can see we get different random buildings, different random heights based on that. But the advantage here is if it works, we can feed in like a gradient. Yeah, see, so now we can feed in a gradient and we can go circular and invert that, and now you can see that we can fall off on the edge so that the buildings are more in the middle than on the outside, and eventually these are all just geometry. So we could go into our, so those are being set by that. Now we do have to keep everything in the realm of materials. I think we can't be randomly scaling, well I guess we could, well, we have a variation setting, but that's not what we want. There's no progressing. We could probably change a random seed. I'm not even sure if there's a random seed, to tell you the truth. I don't think there is actually a random seed inside of hair. So yeah, we're kind of stuck with this. So we'd have to feed in the material. I mean, because we can feed in more complex materials, go into a layer shader and feed in some sort of material. The problem comes in, I wonder if we can do a not projector. What am I looking for? Is it projector? No, it is projector. My brain was like, no, it's not projector. Can we offset on Y if we did that? It's not updating it. It's set to spherical though, so let's set that to cubic. Offset. No, see if that doesn't. It's not updating it. Now, if the noise was animated, I hope it would. Yeah, it's going to animate. Whoa, that's cool. I forgot they're dynamic still, so it's animating, and then they suddenly bent over, which is hilarious. Go for now. Let's turn off dynamics. And oh, that's interesting. I turned off dynamics, and it stopped animating them. Animation. Interesting. Apparently Dynamics enables it to be able to be refreshing, which is very strange to me. By turning off collisions and making it rigid, I think that it's going to pretty much just, they're going to stay vertical. But now it does properly update with the noise we fed into the layer shader. The problem is that I don't want this to animate that way. I would want it to animate via me changing these settings somehow. And unfortunately, well, okay, we can do, I guess we can move, we have options here. It's just not as clean as I'd want it to be. It seems like it's going to let us change the scaling here, the size. So you can see we do get some motion that way, but it's not letting us do it via offsetting in position, which would be a way of progressing the noise forward. I'm curious, I don't even think this projection means anything. If I set the spherical or frontal or any of these, none of them matter because of the 3D, the nature of the 3D noise. So, yeah, they're all behaving as if they were set to UVW. So a little bit of a limitation there. Having said that, we do, and we can't animate noise because we just have an animation speed and not a not a time, like not a period, not an offset. What we really need in here is an offset in time, and that would enable us to progress there. But that's just using this noise. There's probably a ton of different ways. We could probably put a gradient in there and use a bunch of turbulence, and then I think that we do, oh, frequency is again a speed. Yeah, that's not what we want. And we could randomly do different seeds, but that's not what I want to do. It's really noise, and we could set the noise to be 2D, and then it actually might do different projection types. Frontal, nope, even that doesn't work. So important to note that projection does not matter. It just takes in the noise, and whatever it is, it is. So that is tricky, tricky. Let me think. I like these, and I like them animating. And then we can have them animating like that, and then this is based on the noise, so we can say multiply, and now they're animated, but they have this fall off, which is really cool. We could even drag that in a bit. Oops. Pull that in. There, so we get this nice fall off going. And then, yeah, those are pushing up, and then I wonder if we could put a posterize. 0 posterize, and yeah, now we can add in some extra levels. Yeah, there you get more of a stop motion-y vibe. So they can't go to every single level. There's only like set levels they could go to, which is neat. But they're constant. It's constantly moving forward, and that's kind of, if we were going to be driving it with a fun animation, I would want to be controlling that via some control. But in any case, this has us, now we've got this nice little, kind of city-esque grid going up and down. But would we be able to do that little pit effect? And my thought is if we grow our hairs, well, these are stuck to the surface. So if we were to displace, and I'm just going to create a displacer. If we were to displace our original plane, and let's do it with a sphere. Let's go ahead and pull that out and do a full fall off. If we displace, and then I'm going to feed it a full color white, and let's displace a whole bunch, so we'll do that. But really what we want is negative, so let's put in negative that. All right, so now they push down, and actually that seems to be working pretty well. Oh, no. Okay, so now you see that they're going to tilt over with our shape, but I'm pretty sure we can go into the hairs and go to the guides. And right now the growth is based on the normal, but I'm going to say it's based on direction, and the direction is going to be Y. And now we hide our original object, and now you can see that we have the hairs grown, but they can go down into the pit. And now we can control that. We have complete control, hopefully, over this. We can animate that live. Ooh, dear. That's interesting. Whoa, I wonder if we can, because it's based on Y from the point it was grown, which is interesting. But I guess I just want to see if that works. So yeah, it's pushing up. So if we just animate this somehow, what's a good way of animating it? I guess just feeding in a noise. Yeah, let's go into our displacer. We'll go into fall off. Let's create a simple random field. Yeah, look, they instantly are changing orientation. So we might need to, yeah, this is interesting. We might need to clone our shapes a little bit better. Let's change this to a noise. I'm gonna make the noise really big, and let's give it some animation speed. So now you can see that they seem to be grown at a certain point, and then they start wiggling around after that. So what that means is we need our individual polygons to be staying where they are. So what we need to do is probably explode out our polygons. I'm going to delete that, and so we're going to do our original shape. And I think if I frame forward and backward, it seems to be quite confused. The hairs probably just need to be reset. Let's go to normal and then back to direction. Yeah, it just got confused because it established the normals at an earlier point. So you can see that it's cloning onto each polygon, and then that polygon is rotating, and then it doesn't know what to do with it. But if instead of rotating, what if we exploded... It depends on the order of operations, but if we explode out our polygon points, let's turn off our hair for a second. If I use the explosion deformer and we give it a little bit of strength, then you'll see, I'm going to want to give it a 0 speed, 0 angle, but I'm going to say the end size should be a little smaller. Oh, actually, we want to do 0.9. And now the strength can be 100. And we can say 0 rotation. There we go. That's what I wanted. So you can see I've actually exploded out my individual polygons. Now, if we grow our hairs on there, are those counting as individual polygons? I'm not sure. So we need to test it now by going to, that's deforming. After that deformer has deformed, let's go ahead and create a MoGraph plane effector again. And we're going to treat it like a deformer, which means it will come after the explosion effects. And I don't know if this will work or not. But we can go ahead and once again deform on negative Z. So I'll say negative 100. And we'll go to the deformer. And I'm going to say I want you to deform not the point, but the entire polygon. You see all the polygons move down. Now, they all moved down, but you see our hairs didn't move. So that's not encouraging. I'm going to go ahead and create a spherical field. And yeah, so now you can see that they're not following our plane, which is interesting. Not necessarily wrong, but let's go ahead and try using a connect object. So now we're connecting it. We don't need to weld, but that becomes a brand new object. And let's tell the hairs to grow on the connect object instead of our original plane. And now we see that they did indeed pop downward. Okay, a good step there. Now, let's see if animating our spherical field will update. Look at that, woo! And now they're not changing direction. Boom. Nice, 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 nice. So now we can visually hide this. We just get our final hairs being generated individually, and now we can control the fall off on here via whatever the heck we want. Let's go ahead back into our plane effector. Let's create a let's see, let's create another random field, and the random field I'm going to set to noise, and the noise we're going to make nice and big. So we get this big old noise. I'm going to unclamp this. Let's set it to normal, and let's give it some animation speed. There we go. So now the entire thing is going to be wiggling around, but then I can put the spherical field above it, and I can say multiply. And now we get that motion in the center point traveling wherever we have this fall off, or there or not there. And now these can all be traveling around up and down, doing their thing. Awesome. And then if we wanted to, that's a plane effector doing its thing. Let's go ahead and make it more extreme so we can, more extreme, but not too much more extreme. So we can do that. Probably be nice to make more hairs here. And honestly, setting a minimum would be a good idea. So let's go back to our hairs, and we've got our length set with a lot of variation. I'm going to lower that variation. So those should be working. And then we've got our gradient, and if I make it so that this doesn't go all the way to black, then everything has a minimum. There we go. That's what I wanted. But honestly, I wanted this to be quite a bit. I want all of them to have some decent length because I'd rather that they don't break away. Let's go really extreme here. If we go to our hairs and I say that they have a length of 300, then now we're going to get all that variation that we had, but we won't see their missing parts. This might look a little bit better if we make this go vertically instead of down in the pit. That's fine, but we can do that. So yeah, you can see how just by making these longer, you see we're getting them constantly stretching properly. Now, obviously at this point we could have just done clones. Having said that, though, I think it'd be pretty easy right now to, just go and double the amount of these. Oh, look, I love the wiggle that we're getting for free. We can double the number of everything here, and it should just kind of update. Well, sort of. I just made it so there should be twice as many hairs, but it didn't. And that's because the hairs have to be recalculated. So I'd have to go to editing and say regrow. Oh, actually, we need to go to the count. The count is always, it won't increase. You have to manually tell it to go back up to full. And now I can say regrow, and now we get tons of these. And what's cool here is that they should still play really fast. I guess it dropped down to 9 frames a second maybe because of the way we're animating. But yeah, that seems to be working pretty well. And then we've got all this variation inside of the hairs. I kind of want to go really easy on that. In fact, I might want to turn that off for a second. So now we're just purely seeing what we're feeding through our effector. And now I feel a little weird with the way we're doing it because we could have just done this with straight up clones rather than doing it with hair. But now that we're here, we can control this with by increasing our radius, double the amount, and then we can go inside of our noise and let's go back into fall off on the plane. We can make that quantize again, which I think is a really neat effect over here. You know, on top of this entire thing is you add this in, and now all of these are being forced to snap to particular steps. So we can add more or less steps, and it will be traveling up or down those as it goes. Back to our plane effector. Have it go negative. Then we get our pit effect. It's pretty cool. Let's turn on some SSAO. There we go. They pop a little bit better. And then even that, it's like, okay, this is creating different levels, but then because everything's being controlled by this plane effector, we could always go in and create a another random. Let's create another random field, which is going to add a bunch of vertical, you know, horizontal and vertical randomness. But inside of that random field, it becomes really straightforward to go to remapping, and we can clamp in a min and the max. We should also make sure that that is set to, let's say, overlay. And now with that random field, we could start adding in some randomness here. So we can say, okay, there's a little bit of randomness in the bottom of the pit, or we can pull this one in and be like, okay, no randomness except up at the top. And then, yeah, depending on the way we have it set to overlay, or I don't know, just a lot of different combinations. We could chill this out a little bit. We also just set it to normal, and then do a little overlay on top of it, so we get our overall levels, but then a little variation on there. I'm gonna turn off clamping, although visually it doesn't make a difference here, turning off clamping. But yeah, we get all these popping in and out of existence. Bing, ding, ding, ding. And the way that they're popping in and out, I think that we'd probably be able to go and add a delay. Yeah, so if you add in the delay and set that to spring, then it's going to be jumping from one position to the other. If we put the spring down really low, then they should be trying to snap to their new position, but we now get that little bit of transition between them. I'm going to turn off the random for a little bit. I guess the spring needs to be real weak. But without the spring, you'll just see they're going to go pop. They're there or they're not. And if we put in that little bit of a spring, then as they pop in, they're going to spring to their final positions. I'm trying to think if there's any actual reason to do this with hair, where it makes hair superior to just doing a series of clones. And like I say, I'm having trouble thinking of any reason that actually justifies that. I think it would be better if they were a series of clones, but obviously controlling this via quantizes and fall-offs and noises is relatively straightforward. Anyway, we explored another possibility there, so let's go ahead and give that a save and try another question. Definitely have time for one or two more. Why would we do it with hair? Because we can brush it, of course. That is a fair point. And then we could have it blowing in the wind. Oh, and also I have a bunch of subdivisions on here we don't need. If I turn on our polygon mode here, you can see I've got all these subdivisions. So what we should have done is gone into the hair and said segments 1. Yeah, there. And now, oh man, look how much quicker it is. Yeah, we could have been running at the speed. It looked cooler. It looks cooler with polygon mode turned on. If I was going to render it, I'd want it to render more like this. Bing, 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 bing. And the, yeah, that's the noise. We can chill that noise out there. I guess the noise is multiplying or overlaying. Yeah, that's set to multiply. So if we set our spherical to normal, yeah, I just feel like you get slightly better motion here. You see as I move this, we get that really great little bit of springiness as it travels from one side to the other. Boing. Boing, boing, boing. That's just something that we never ever could have done with the old MoGraph. So man, this makes MoGraph so much more powerful. Ding, doing, 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 doing. Well, there's no need to brush this here And I just got rid of all the points, so that wouldn't work as well. But yeah, you could totally brush it if we add on 10 points and we go into our simulate hair tools, and we grab our brush. Then we can brush our nice little cliff, which is pretty weird, but you can do it. You can do it. What does that even do now? Doing, doing, doing. It just becomes weird. Yeah, but if you were to show me this and be like, how was this made? I'd be like, oh man, I don't know. That's weird. But there you go. Straighten. Apply. New transform. Pretty weird. Did somebody ask another question earlier? Ah, yes, I thought I saw one. Venu. I have a question about the effect at 54 seconds in. Let's see what we got here. No audio. Goodbye design. A staff pick from Mickey Nemsek. Mickey Nemsek. A passion project from the summer of 2018. Ooh, I already like the marbles rolling around. Kind of get a galaxy thing going. Goodbye design. So you said 54 seconds. Oh man, this is cool looking. It's just like all these really great design principles combined with a bunch of motion. Oh, that's cool. So 54. Those look like the coffee makers we included would like it. Maybe not exactly 54. Oh, you just mean this ribbon? This ribbon shooting out? Whee! Oh, okay, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I really love the way they're piling up that way. I don't know if we can get that, but let's see if we can get something. Wow, these are, like, the design on this one is absolutely gorgeous. I do like it. Let's see. Well, I mean, that's not necessarily dynamic. I'm not seeing the ribbons explicitly bump into the other parts of the ribbon, but presumably it is entirely dynamic. So you can't make something like cinema will not deal with objects that are changing point count while dynamic. It just doesn't like it. So you can't do that. So if you're going to have a dynamic object, it has to be dynamic the entire time with its final point count. So what that then makes me think is we need like the entire final ribbon. So if we're going to do this as light as possible, then we're going to make this 1 unit and then shrink that to probably about 10. We'd make everything 10, so we can make that 1,000, and then that'd be 1 unit, and then that would become 100 units, and they're little squares, but that probably needs to be at least 10 times longer. Whoa, that gets long. But it's only 1,000 polygons, so hopefully that's not that many, and that seems maybe about right. We'd probably want to double or triple it, but let's just see how this goes. So you get that, and one thought is, okay, so we're going to have to make it dynamic. We're going to have to go soft body. Let's see how far we can push this, actually. I'm going to make it soft body, and that means it's immediately going to begin falling to the ground. Now, based on what we saw, we might want gravity. So something I'm thinking is let's make a cube, and I'm going to move it down minus 100 and 1. So it's 1 extra down, and let's make it also 1,000 long. or 10,000 long rather. There we go. So that is now gravity. It can't fall down. So let's go ahead and make this a collider body. So we'll go simulation collider body, and I'm going to make this collider here. I'm going to make it have 0 bounce and 0 friction. So it doesn't matter if the other one has any bounce or any friction. It's not getting anything from this. All right. So we got that. Now, if we make a simulation particle wind, then we have a wind, and the wind is blowing in that direction, which is exactly what we want. And it's going to be affecting everything all the time and just blow at full power. And typically I make the wind a little bit stronger, let's say 55, no turbulence or anything. But what we can do now is go into the fall off, and I'm going to create a linear field. And let's make the linear field set to Z+. And I'm going to move that out here. Yes, you know, what we really should do is put it right there and then make it really small. I'm going to do 1. I think I've seen it glitch if I put it to 0, so I always give it a little bit of depth, but that might have just been a one-shot type of thing. But let's just say that the entire recorder is here and it's running along the track, and the wind should be blowing. I might have this backwards, but it should be blowing full power until it gets there, and then it's just kind of free to do whatever. So let's hit play, and it doesn't seem... Oh, no, it should be doing something. So I'm thinking I did that backwards, so let's do Z-. And hit play. Okay, cool. Now you do indeed see it blowing forward. So now the entire thing should blow forward, and nothing should be having any effect on it whatsoever. So it should just sort of fall off here, and as the wind pushes off the side, gravity should take over, and it's just going to start kind of falling. So, okay, that's fine and dandy. Let's go into its dynamics of the ribbon. Put that up on the top. Let's check our soft body settings. A couple things. First of all, I'm going to turn off self collisions just while we're doing tests. So it won't bump into itself, but it'll do everything else, and it should run really quick. Then we can go to soft body, and we can say, do we want the stretch? No. So structure of 100 is fine. Do we want to wiggle around on that? I'm going to say no. We can put lots of damping on there. It's going to really drain the energy out. And then how much can it bend? Shear and flexion. I think we actually want it to bend a decent amount, but at the same time, we want it to be maintaining a little bit of that ribboniness, that curvature to it. It shouldn't just start doing 90-degree turns. So honestly, these default values are not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of leave the rest of those as they are. Now I'm not sure. I don't like looking at the reference too much after we do the initial thing, but they do. Is it coming out in an? Okay, it's rolling off at an angle, and that's what's giving it its vertical kind of its verticalness. But along those lines, let's just take the liberty of creating a second wind here. And this one we're going to move over visually. We don't have to move it over, but I'm going to move it over, and let's spin it upward. And I'm going to change this linear field to be a box field. We're going to make it nice and big, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and let's zero it out. So there it is. So now, when it essentially, as soon as it exits, it's suddenly going to be over here, and this box wind is going to be blowing it up into the air. And that should be fine. Let's see what that does. So let's see, the ribbon should get blown out, and then it comes over here, and it doesn't seem to be having much of an effect, which is interesting. And I didn't change the forces to include or exclude. We've got this box. It should have traveled inside of it. And our remapping, inner strength, boom. It's full strength now, so it's before it wasn't having much of an effect until it got into the middle. So hopefully now we'll see something a little stronger. And actually, okay, so we got to keep in mind that we're also trying to counteract gravity, and gravity is saying that it doesn't care too much about this. This is not counteracting gravity all that much. Now, a couple things I want to do. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts to this one. Let's give it a save because it's going fine so far. Ribbon. Let's go back into our dynamics, and I want to give it drag. I'm going to give it 25% drag, and then lift. I'm going to give it 90% lift, and I'm going to say two-sided because it's not a volume, it's just a flat polygon, so it can see either side. Now, one of the hopes here is that it can kind of freely slide forward, and this wind is going to push it forward, but once it gets twisted, suddenly gravity is going to want to stop it, and you see, actually, it's working pretty well. Look at this little twisting that we're getting almost right away. As soon as it bends a little bit, wind is taking over, and it's trying to add drag onto it. So right away, that's kind of interesting. So yeah, that's working. And then we've got our damping. Now this one gets tricky. I want energy to be drained out of the system, but I don't want. Well, I guess we might just need to drain energy out of the system. Let's try 55, which is pretty high, but that's going to be draining energy out of the system all the time. But I would think that that would mean that once it exits this point and this wind is no longer blowing on it, it's going to be kind of trying to stop. Now you see it's still moving forward quite a bit, although less. I'm going to go ahead and put this on 99%. And now we can see that it's draining tons of the energy out here. But if I rewind, hit play, it's barely moving forward. So as we increase our damping, we're going to have to also increase our original wind, pushing it outward. Although I got to say, look at that nice little ribboning we're getting. It's encouraging. So let's go ahead and set this wind speed up to almost 4 times the amount. So now there's lots of wind coming out. And let's rewind. So now it's trying to drain the energy out from it, but it's getting pushed quite a bit from this initial thing. And look at that. Actually, this is working incredibly well. That's looking great. We're getting all this little twisting. This wind is sort of neutral. I think what I might want to do is change this to a spherical fall off. Let's change it to spherical. And then I'm going to put the radius up to 100. And I want the wind to be 3 times as strong, so it should be actually able to push it up into the air. But I want the spherical field probably be 500. And then I'm going to move this over. So it's going to kind of catch it right as it comes out. And then after that, normal gravity can take over. Let's also give ourselves some more frames. All right, so that's going. The overall energy drain is pulling these to try and stop. And this overall wind is, oh, and I should have given that some fall off. Remapping. Yes, have a decent amount of fall off here. So the wind is going to get strong. It's going to kind of wave up into the air. I can even pull that back a little bit. So it's going to pull up and get pushed there. And because the fall off is so strong, I'm going to double the strength of that wind. Okay. So let's see, then yeah, so this wind is going to be picking up and pushing into the air. As it falls off here, then gravity should be able to mostly take over, and we should kind of see it ribbon back down again. So that's working. Yeah, okay, nice, working. Yeah, look at that. Now, curious. It seems to be we're draining so much energy here that I think it's like log jamming it so that the effect is going further back and back and back, and it's starting to fall back here, which is cool. It's interesting. Something I'm thinking, I was going to try this, but then this started working well enough. But what I want to try and do is turn off that linear damping and instead make a simulate particle friction. And this friction is really strong, but I want to go ahead and put another fall off on there. Let's do I think I actually just want to steal the field from the wind and drop that in there, except I'm going to flip it around. So it's only having the effect after that point. So a little friction goes a long way. So the hope here is that once it goes into that friction, oh wow, okay, it's log jamming it back again really quickly. I'm going to turn off the log jam. Let's just see if that is indeed what's causing it. You'll see actually that it starts happening right away, even with no friction, and now we have no damping. This drag might be a culprit, where it's starting to start wiggling back there because of the drag. It could just be some slight imperfection. It might also have to do with collision noise. I'm going to get rid of the collision noise and let that slide. Still happens. Let's go ahead and turn off gravity. Dynamics, Control D or Command D, 0 gravity. And now there shouldn't be any gravity, which 0 gravity means I don't need this cube at all because it's just not doing anything back there. So, oh, interesting. It still suddenly happens. I'm pretty sure this wind isn't having any effect. So at this point, it is just, whoa. Okay, maybe that, wait. Why is this spherical field? It seems like this vertical wind is doing something. Let's make sure it's not until it's after that point, but I really, really, really don't think that's a thing. Yeah, so it's like as soon as I add these imperfections in, it seems to be able to ripple its way back into the rest of it, which is really, really bizarre. That is not... I mean, it could be any combination of the things we were just doing that could be the culprit, but that one is unexpected. Having said all that, it's entirely possible that we might be able to just make a cube and then make it... Let's just make it 2 units tall and 12 units wide and 10,000 units long. So now you see we get this nice little box that can be trapped inside of. Make that editable. Delete the point there, and then let's see if that can successfully keep it trapped. Don't know if it will. Collider body. No friction, no bounce, no noise. All right. And let's even make it invisible. I'm going to add a display tag, and let's make it wireframe. We'll turn on lines. So now we're seeing through it into the ribbon underneath it, and let's see if that can handle it. It shouldn't slow it down at all. Did it just... we have to tell it to be a static mesh, so it can calculate the inside of it. It's going to slow us down a lot. Oop, and everything instantly escaped from it. Can't say I'm surprised. Kind of expected that. Let's make it 2 units taller, 2 units wider. A little more freedom in there. Nope, still explodes outward. We could crank up our sub frames to maybe keep it trapped in there. That is very weird. Well, this is necessarily unexpected because... Oh, wait, now I turned off that wind, and are we still getting the effect? Go away, cube. Yeah, see, that just flies forward, but my assumption is at a certain point we're just going to get some random noise, which will compound, so if that just successfully flew all the way. Let's try turning on just the friction. Let's find out where this starts happening. So friction, so it's going to be trying to slow it down. We do get some nice, interesting, like ribboning looping there. But I guess my point being is the drag that we're feeding through could be the culprit here. This drag, I'm going to turn that off. So with no drag, if we turn our wind back on again, then it shouldn't be slowing it down. No, it still does it. That is super bizarre. Because look, this wind is just blowing it perfectly straight. So why is this thing shooting way off to the side if, like, it should be only able to travel in that direction, but suddenly it's like, nope, going that way. And is that just a fact of it compounding from the lift? The lift and the drag? I mean, okay, by turning off lift, you can see that a lot of it's chilled out, but it's definitely still adding in some imperfection. And as we go further, it's happening. Now we're still getting the really nice squiggle. You know, look at those really nice loops and ribbon, although that seemed to have fallen down. Yeah, there's a certain point where it's like, nope, I'm gonna go crazy. Let's see if it has another version, because I think the earlier one that was kind of working, don't want to lose that. Trying to think. The friction seemed dangerous. Let's try putting our really heavy damping back in again. The advantage of doing the heavy damping is that those are losing their energy as well. Well, isn't that funky? What is that? Like, it's acting as if I have stiffness, but there is no stiffness. I'm going to go ahead and give it a rotational and linear positional thing, and let's see. Okay, that's going to stop it from moving, but it shouldn't stop it from deforming. Interesting. That's making me think. When Dynamics calculates, it definitely does a thing where it is calculating individual points, but then your overall object will act like it's moving and rotating. And by telling it not to move and rotate, it suddenly freaked out, which is making me think that as this partially rotates upward, its upward angle is changing, and that's creating um, a problem with it. It's very peculiar. Very peculiar indeed. I'm going to go back to the first version. Oh, let's see. I think this is when everything was simpler, and I don't think it freaked out quite so much. I wonder if we introduced something at a certain point. Because you see, that's good. I mean, did we just give ourselves more frames and we just never were going long enough to see the broken part? Yeah, the wind's going a lot slower. But this is traveling outward. That seems fine. No problems back here. So, oh, okay, right there. You do see it happen at the end. So it was happening even in the early part. Most curious. Most curious indeed. Now we did turn off the overall gravity. So let's put that back on. Let's go ahead and turn on our original box here. And I'm even kind of curious as if let's go and copy the box, and I'm going to scoot it over. It's 200. So I'm going to move it over 220. And nope, I don't want to move it 220. I'm just going to eyeball it. Let's go up, and I'm going to scoot off to the side like that. So you just kind of create this trough for it to try and travel. And let's do the negative version on that one, negative X. So there's a little bit of a trough. There's no roof on it. But hopefully that should be relatively calm. Display. Lines. Okay. Not super confident that that's going to do anything, but let's see. Yeah, see, that's still trying to go crazy. It couldn't get off the side, though. So, you know, maybe this bigger box method, instead of trapping it in a box, making 3 boxes, and now 4 boxes. Maybe that will keep it super trapped. Oh, yeah, actually. It does seem to be keeping it trapped. So before it could escape, but now there's thicker geometry there, so it's keeping it more trapped. So, you know, that's a plus. Okay, well, we can continue from here then. I can give that a save. All right, so where were we? I like the idea of lift and drag. Drag and lift are huge. Depending on the speed it's going, it can catch kind of the air, and then it'll curve based on that direction. Like, honestly, I would feel like enough of, like, we can get rid of the linear damping and then just really go with this drag concept. And as the wind blows, the drag is going to single-handedly be wanting to slow it down. That should be a lot of air resistance. And we're getting lots of nice looping, but it is still pushing out forward. I'm going to put, yeah, we've got, now keep in mind, gravity's back on again, but based on these ribbons and the way they're traveling, that they're, with very, very heavy lifts, it's going to be very unlikely that they sink. It's going to take a long time for them to sink. So that's just a fun little detail there. And I like the way this last little part was forced to slow down. I think each of them kind of cascaded back and slowed down. Having done all that, I do think putting in a decent amount of this damping is going to go a long way. So let's put 80% damping, but then this drag, I don't know, I don't like going too high on these. I don't have a super strong intuition for the way those numbers should be, but let's keep a decent amount of it. So this wind, this vertical wind, I want this to be way stronger. More than twice as strong. So as it goes in, the wind should really be yeah, 3 times as strong. I want it to happen almost as soon as it gets in. Okay, not bad. And they start pushing out. Now you see how kind of the loops that they're getting? I think that that is going to be highly, it's going to be represented, well, a couple things we need to do. First of all, that's flying way too far. So that's again making me want to add more damping. Remember the big numbers are, until you start getting these bigger numbers, you're not going to really see too much of an effect. So this is, it's still traveling quite a bit. So until we start getting to the point where at like 98, 99, I don't know that the energy drains out that quickly. Like how high do, I mean, if we say 100, it should just kind of stop dead. Or for some reason start going backwards. But 99% should be draining a lot of its energy. So let's just see. That should be pushing forward. This wind is really strong, pushing it up. But only where a force is actively acting upon it should it ever really be able to move very much. So yeah, there we go. Now it starts chilling out a little bit. So what that makes me want to do is grab our spherical wind, shrink it quite a bit, and then just move it in. So it's going to get hit kind of like right as it comes out. It comes flying out, and the wind's like, whoa, hey, and then it pushes it up into the air. And then it can just kind of do whatever it wants. 3 times as strong. Interesting. Yeah, and then it starts drifting away. The ribbons look pretty nice. We started, I mean, it gets a little messy there. Now we start messing with our shear inflection. I would want to probably drain a lot of the energy out from their vibrations. We don't want them like oscillating. So we can really slow those down so that it's not going to introduce a lot of that. But it also is making me want to give it a pretty strong shear inflection so that it's really trying to kind of straighten itself out. So we're going to get rounder ribbon sections. That's interesting. Staying, I mean, that's making it, I mean, I guess it's kind of what I said it would do. It's making it a lot rounder. Man, there's, it's pretty interesting, the behaviors that we're getting from it. I'm going to do a force of 99.9. Interesting. I'm surprised that these are able to continue forward with so much energy drain. So that's just making me not trust them at all. Although if I turn it off, you see they start going very quickly. But now I want to turn back on our friction. Friction behaves as a little more brute force. So that friction should be equal. Let's go ahead and make it 10 times as strong. There we go. You see immediately it's draining those quite a bit. That's mode acceleration. Okay, if we go to 1,000, it just explodes. Boom, dead. Interesting. Mode acceleration, and there's also mode force. I'm never super clear on the difference between those. Whoa. Explode. I don't know. At this point, we're getting... Here's the thing is I feel really confident that we get something pretty much identical to what we saw in the reference. So I don't want to stop, but we're getting to the point where I felt like we could have a really clean, simple rig, and now it's turning into surprisingly noodly settings where we're being forced to get really specific. And I just don't feel like we should have to be getting this specific. I don't understand why our linear damping isn't doing most of the work for us there. I'm going to try adding in a bunch of drag. Let's go lots of drag, easy on the lift. No friction, no damping. Flying out quite fast. I kind of liked it when this was lower. So let's see, was it the lower damping or the lower overall setting? Let's try lowering the damping. Well, it introduces more wiggliness there. So the damping, yeah, okay, lower damping actually seems to be giving us better looking ribbons overall. So let's try lowering that even further. Oh, interesting. I didn't think damping would be the biggest variable here, but look, it's definitely giving us way better ribboning there. Let's try increasing our shear inflection, which should try and round it out more, but with the low damping, I think we can get some really nice layering up and wiggling there. Yeah, look at that. Very nice ribboning there. So, okay, I wouldn't have thought, but like a high number, but low damping seems to give us the nicest looking kind of looping ribboning there. And it kind of terminates there pretty well. We're going to have to turn off this because it's stopping it. But I'll say the weird thing here is, why does that keep on progressing forward? It's as if the entire object had to move forward. And the less of it that was being blown forward by this wind, then the less of it that it seemed to want to accelerate. It's as if this wind is being applied to every point, but it should only be being applied when it's before it. Now, having said that, we can do a slight alternative on this. Right now we have a wind blowing on it, and it's blowing at a very weak value for a long time. But I have a new thought. What if we get rid of the linear field, and there's already no friction here? If we use this wind, I'm going to add a signal tag, but you can keyframe it. This just makes it easier for me. What I'm going to do is say wind speed, and I'm going to put it in there, and we're going to give this a really high wind speed. I'm going to add in like a 5 in there. So this is like 5 times as big. I'm going to say that it should transition from full power to low power over the course of 2 frames. So it's going to get all of its power right away, and then that's all it ever gets, and it just keeps on blowing forward. So let's see what happens. So we get this initial burst, and now we're not constantly feeding it new motion. It's just got its original motion. Now, I have a fear, yeah, it's going to feed back eventually to the point where it doesn't have enough velocity to keep on going forward. Now, that could have to do with the way we set this wind up. So I'm going to pull that forward a little bit. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay, let's do it again. Boom. Now, this big burst of speed, it should be constantly pushing forward. But as this ripple essentially travels backward, it's introducing a slowdown to it. And eventually, I think that will come to a halt, and then we'll just be left with this. I also find entertaining this wind is so strong in here that it's almost behaving like it's a dynamic object, and it's just kind of draping over it, which is pretty entertaining. Not really something I've ever tinkered with, but it's kind of cool. It could probably even be pulled fairly taut here. Okay, so that's an interesting thing. That could be all the, yeah, like I said, all the bouncing and wiggling and imperfections that's getting introduced by traveling backward is doing that. But maybe we can do this initial burst of speed and then lower down to something weak, like 55. So it's going to be constantly getting some wind blown through, but it's only really fast in the beginning. And then, but although I did get rid of the wind, I got rid of the fall off. Why did I do that? I'm going to copy this fall off back in again. Should have just turned it off, not deleted it. And now invert it again. So now it should only be this wind is applying before it gets thrown out. And that gets thrown out, and then there's some random wind blowing it up. It's perhaps a little strong. Perhaps. But the rest of the wind should continue. Now, it just seems like the more wind we give it, the more that this is traveling forward. Even, this is the interesting part, is even with us draining, well, I guess I got rid of the draining energy, and right now it's just drag doing it. Drag doesn't really seem to be stopping it that much. I don't think drag, oh, apparently drag can be given, oh dear. Okay, drag can go above 100%, although 100% might be, it might be a very similar parameter where by giving it above, by going in the same way that 99% was a huge number, this might be, but actually, to tell you the truth, it doesn't seem to be. Let's do 200%. And it still seems to move forward 500%. That seems to finally be slowing it down. So maybe that's something to do. Yeah, look at that. That's interesting. Okay, so a heavy drag seems to be doing something interesting for us. So now this wind feels like it should be more over here. I mean, this wind is really bugging me. Well, I almost feel like the other one was given a, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of coming at more of an angle and then just naturally shooting upward, and we're kind of forcing it upward with this wind, which seems less natural for it. It's almost like I just want to do something like that, where it's just glancing off of it and then quickly gets away from it. I don't want it to live in it forever. I want it to get away from it, and then it's only affected in that beginning part. And then I guess that goes back to what I had been doing, which was making it very powerful and then making it very small. So by doing something like that, you know, the hope would be it's going to go through, get hit, and then travel upward, and then it won't ever be able to really land on it because it's mostly being pushed immediately upward. Maybe that's better as a box. I don't know. I'm mostly tinkering now, although I am super interested in the results we're getting. Y should only be like 50. So a nice thin box. So now it has to travel through it. And then as soon as it travels through, it's not being affected anymore. So you get this big vertical effect. Of course, the slower it goes, the more likely it is to travel up and up and up and up. Oh, there. Chill that out a little bit. And let's go ahead with go real easy with the lift here. The lift is what's stopping it from falling down. I think we want it to start wisping downward, like maybe randomly not going downward. Now let's see this vertical. Okay, so I mean, you see this is working pretty well. I mean, we're getting really nice ribboning going on here. A couple subdivisions in there, I think, would be working really well. The trouble that we're still getting is that it keeps on wanting to move forward. Like, it's constantly moving more forward. And once again, that seems to be that if this wind is still blowing, it's going to keep moving forward. But even though the wind, it's outside of the fall off of the wind. This is going to be silly, but I'm going to go and put a box field on that one. So now it's as if the wind, it's only being blown forward when it's inside this box, which is funky. Okay, obviously that's behaving very strangely. Let's go ahead and give it some inner fall off. And I mean, it probably can't pull all the other ones from where it is, so this is probably going to break. Okay. What? Oh, signal controlling that. That's why. I was like, why does it keep on overriding? Boom. Okay, lots of speed, not enough to pull it. Let's try going even higher. Is that enough to keep on constantly pulling? Yeah, maybe. So here's the new concept. I'm taking this big wind, which is pulling all of the ribbon, and instead of it being a linear fall off, I made it a box fall off. And the box fall off is essentially saying, like, it's going to keep on pulling, but only within here. So it's constantly yanking the previous parts forward. But the forward parts are definitely not getting continually pushed forward anymore. It doesn't seem to be. Yeah, so these are getting pushed forward in a constant rate, and then they can just kind of do whatever they want. I'm going to make this box field even smaller. I think you can see this ribbon. You see it's getting really stretched out. It fixes itself once it gets out, but it's getting really stretched out because it's having to pull all of its really long tail to get there, which is pretty interesting. And then those go up, and then I'm inclined to want to make a big turbulence. Let's make a turbulence, and we're going to give it some big scale, probably pretty big. And let's see what that does. We have a lot of, okay, so a couple things. First of all, because we changed the way the wind works, we might be able to go easier on the drag here. These don't need to be getting dragged down quite so much. And we've got our turbulence, which is just affecting everything. I'm going to start cranking up its strength. Okay, going bigger there. Scale's too big, obviously. It's intentionally too high right now, but what should happen is this turbulence should be big enough to start overriding some of the random moving right, and it should start pulling left, pulling right, pulling right. So let's give that some strength. Okay, cool. Now that we're going to get this ribbon shooting out, the drag is seemingly slowing it down. That's flinging it up. I'm going to turn off this upward wind. Oop, not, yeah. Oh, no, I still want the upward wind. I forgot the box now. We're still losing a lot of power really quickly. Is that the drag? Let's find out. Whee! Okay, so now it's getting stopped because it doesn't have enough additional tail coming through. So that's an interesting variable. So a little bit of drag seems to combine well with this method. Although this box fall off, maybe we could make that a little bit better by making it longer. Pulling it back a little more. And probably fixing the fall off. So it's pretty much full strength. So this whole bigger section is pulled, so hopefully it can chill itself out by the time it's getting near the front. It's making me doubt the way the linear was working. Tell you the truth. Like that's so weird. I mean, do you understand why it was MW saying could it be done with X particles and cloth? Entirely possible. I don't know. I've barely tinkered with it, so I'm not sure. I'm just not. We made a linear field version of this, and the linear field version should work perfectly, but it just didn't seem to. Now I'm going to. Let's go ahead and zero this all out. Oh, that's interesting. I guess the wind is there. Yeah. Oh, the wrong box. Oh, yeah. Oh. I had to undo a few times. I was working with the wrong box there. I'm going to make this box have no fall off, and I'm going to make it as long as the entire little pillar here that they're trapped inside. Aren't these double the size that they claim they are? Yeah, these, it's a thing that cinema's always done where fall offs are twice as big as their number says. It's like it's that fall off in one direction and the other direction, which is very, very unintuitive to me. So anyway, the fall off now, the ribbon is entirely trapped in there, but it's inside of a box fall off, not a linear fall off. So you should be flinging this out at a very, very strong power. Obviously it is. Usually it was 500. Let's chill that out. So the goal here would be, oh, no, once again, signal is driving it. This should blow out, and as soon as it blows out, I would think that would stop. But you see, look, it's still going full speed, really fast. And I think until all of the ribbon gets out, and the instant all the ribbon gets out, suddenly it's like, oh, I don't want to travel forward anymore. That's what's throwing me off. Why is that happening? Like, look at this is behaving exactly the way we want it to. But while any of the ribbon is in the wind, all of it seems to be getting partially affected by the wind. And that doesn't make any sense. I would expect the couple links that are very near the beginning to be getting affected. But why are the later parts getting affected? Let's make sure that the inner width is 99. Don't actually think that'll do anything. But yeah, look. Why? That's blowing full power. Look, it's just going full speed, just like everything else. And as soon as there's, as soon as the ribbon's not in there, then it starts slowing down and behaving exactly the way we want it to. When you are using Softbody, it should be calculating on a per point basis, but it seems to be behaving as if it's calculating on the overall, bigger object. Effect, you are saying if there's stiffness, there is not any stiffness in here. We have 0 stiffness. If there's 0 stiffness, there should be 0 damping. I'm going to put that down to 0 because why not? Pressure means nothing on a two-dimensional object. The shear and all that, that should only affect it on the near parts. And we already have it not self-colliding. Keep soft body shape. I'm never quite sure what that is. What is keep soft body? Oh, never mind. That's not anything. And use deform object. That's not anything. It's a moving mesh. Still blowing out full speed. And as there's less in there, it slows down. And then we get these really nice billowing ribbons afterward. And we were getting that effect even when we were doing things like putting 99.9% linear damping in there, which should be dramatically slowing it down. Well, it's doing something weird now. What was that? I mean, it's something. All right, well, that sort of did something good. Let's try that again. Okay, it's blown out. I put down 99 instead of 99.9. And, I mean, look, okay, it stopped, and it's enough for it to start pulling back, so that's something. Like, I'll take it. I'm unhappy with the force combinations we've been having to do, but that's working pretty well. We're getting a little bit of clumping inside of that. Not entirely sure what to do with that, because we should be capturing the entire thing. The only thing I can think it would be make that wind a little bit bigger. Make it big enough so that the fall off is popping out. So it's getting all full power even as it flies out. That might stop some of the clumping, but I kind of doubt that. Let's see. Okay, now let's take a look at what we are getting here. So it's even like it's a little bit odd. You can see where these seem like they are, I mean, they're bunching up, and then they're even stretching a little bit. So potentially we can go to the soft body and say, okay, we're draining a lot. You know, let's get rid of that. I'm gonna drop this damping down to 5 because it did make the other ones look better. Okay, it's definitely still piling up. So now let's try making it really high, and then. Yeah, so then it's less crazy, but there's more of a uniformity to its mess up. But then we can start doubling the structure. Not really helping. I can go 10 times the strength. And yeah, now with a stronger strength with that, it's going to start, I would think, alternating back and forth, and we can start getting those little loops in between, which could be good. And then, you know, once we put that into a subdivision surface for our final, I think that would look pretty good. Interestingly, this seems to be escaping again. For a second there, our really strong damping seems good, but now look, the whole thing is flying forward again, probably until this stops flying out, and as that slows down, this suddenly doesn't have to go so far. Whee! I mean, parts of it are good, but it is not behaving. Like, I feel like we've built in particular behaviors here, and there's some element that isn't working. This wind is having some sort of influence over the rest of those points, and that fundamentally goes against my understanding of what dynamics should do, and it's really bugging me. And it doesn't even seem like too much of it. I mean, what's making me want to do is make a second wind. And what this one's going to do is we're going to spin it 180 degrees. So I'm going to spin it around. And now we're going to take that box field and I'm going to invert it. So we're going to go remapping and say invert. So now it's the perfect opposite. So now As this wind blows, it should push this ribbon out, and then it should be counteracted by the second wind blowing it back the other direction. And in theory, what that means is this should go it should travel super far left. And it is indeed traveling left, but not that fast. And let's go ahead and cut its power in half. Divided by 2, divided by 2. I'm still driving a signal in case we need to change those numbers. But, okay, so it comes flying out, and then this wind should take over, and it's going to start blowing the other direction. Interesting. Yeah, okay, now you see, once again, okay, now it's slowly starting to seem... What it seems to do is it seems to take the direct proportion of the number of points that are still in the wind, and that is affecting the overall. So it's like if 100% of the points are inside of the wind, inside of the field, all the points are getting 100% of the power. But as the wind goes out, even points that are outside of the field are getting some proportion of the power still applied. And you can definitely see a fall off as it goes. I don't know how long it takes to go, but let's turn off that second wind. And if we have this start fading, so that's the if we're in the min, is that amount. So it's going to start out with that amount, and then at the end, it's going to get to this amount. So we're going to have it slowly fade out over the course of, I don't know, about 222 frames. So the wind is going to be constantly getting weaker now. But yeah, that doesn't even make sense, though, because these are still going to be getting full power blowing out. So it's more of the counter wind would need this type of animation. Yeah, and now the wind's gotten weaker. But you even see how they were flying forward until this wind started fading out, and then those started falling down. But that's not what's in the freaking field. It's inside of a fall off. Why would that matter? Bump, bump, bump. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could keep on going and going and doing more tests here, but I don't know that's gonna be terribly interesting for people. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different things here. Like wouldn't it need lift? Like I was using lift a bunch in there, but that shouldn't be a variable here when I'm telling it to have a 99% energy drain, and it still keeps on traveling forward. And even when we put this friction in, it still was moving forward. So now the only thing that seemed to have any kind of visual effect was when we have this counter wind only on parts of it. But I would think that counter wind is going to be blowing on the inside and the outside. So we could say that, it's got full power there, and then it's going to get weaker as it goes. And eventually at about frame 222, that the wind power has gone down to 0. And I can hit play. And I mean, the hope here would be if we calibrate this correctly, this should slow down after a little bit, but it's going to keep on getting weaker. So, okay, so you see that slow down, but it's still probably too strong. It's going to start blowing it back the other direction. And this has to get weaker as the time moves forward, because otherwise, if it's full strength, as less points are inside of that one, more points start blowing that direction, and the wind gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So now now even look at that. We had this counter wind blowing, and as the counter wind, which shouldn't really be any kind of a variable here, it's just blowing it back the other direction. As this got weaker and weaker, this part started accelerating forward again. Like it stopped, and now with this wind being almost down at 0, it's begun to move towards the right again. And the turbulence noise is small enough that the variation shouldn't be particular. Now everything's out of that one, and now suddenly it doesn't seem like have any influence on the overall object. So I feel like there's some variable here where, like I said, there's something where if I click on this ribbon, do you see how the axis is moved out to this point here? But when I rewind, it's on the inside. So the axis, even though this is soft body, the axis is constantly kind of adapting to the midpoint. And as long as this overall object is moving, then I don't trust this axis. Like this axis moving forward, I think, is representing how much it's making the overall object move forward. And yeah, I think that's actually a really good way of describing the problem as I see it. And I can't think of any way of stopping that from moving because it's just, I think it is just the middle part of the bounding box. Now, if that, I mean, this is a super goof. This is a weird thing I'm going to do here, but it might prove the point and it could potentially fix it. If we have this ribbon here, why don't we go ahead and I'm going to make, let's make a cube and we're going to put the cube into a cloner, and then the cloner, I'm going to set this to be in grid array, and I'm going to make it 2 by 2 by 2, and we're going to make it 20,000, 20,000, 20,000. So these are very big. We've got a very big grid here. So you can see I've got my overall shape here. And now you can see I've got box, 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 box. Okay? So you got all these boxes all over the place. In fact, I'm going to set that to even bigger. We're going to go 4, 4, 4. And now those exist really big and outside the entire thing. Now, if we take our original ribbon, we're at time of 0. Let's save this as number C. Let's go ahead and take our original ribbon and put in a connect object, turn off weld, and we're going to put in this cloner of boxes. And let's make that entire thing the soft body dynamic. So we've introduced a couple of extra polygons, but that has now made the bounding box, which should still mean the center, is way bigger. So the thought is if those boxes aren't being affected by anything, and they shouldn't be, none of these winds actually intersect with them, except the turbulence. But let's just leave that as it is. Besides this little thing wiggling around a tiny, tiny little bit, I would think that it wouldn't be moving at all. But, okay, weird. Look, it's traveling backwards. Weird, 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 weird. Okay, I'm going to turn off the turbulence. So now literally nothing should be affecting those boxes. Except for gravity. Gravity's still turned on. Let's turn off gravity. No gravity. Alrighty. Now let's be methodical here. Oh, we have this bigger box wind. So that one's, oh wait, that is this one. Let's turn that one off. Okay. So now the counter wind is off. The only thing happening is this wind is pushing that ribbon forward. But we are now seeing that our axis is not moving forward. All right, that's progress of a kind. Now let's go take a look at our ribbon and see what it's doing. Look at that. It's not constantly moving forward. Why would that be? All right, well, we've just done an absurd, as far as I'm concerned, this is nonsense, workaround. We just stopped the axis from changing by tricking it into thinking its bounding box was way bigger, and now we can see that this ribbon is blowing forward, and as it blows forward, instantly it's not blowing forward anymore, and our really strong linear dampening is draining the energy out, and it's immediately stopping exactly what we'd expect it to do. And now we're just going to get a pile of this staying there. What the hey? What the heck? Why? Why though? And look at this like awesome looking like bunching and whatnot. Like that's great. This is exactly what we want. Now we do have the, now assuming that it's behaving itself, we can get rid of this linear damping. And now we can just, we can let this fly forward, and now all we have is this drag turned on. And look, even the drag. Look what a good job I think just drag is doing. If I turn off drag, let's see what happens. These fly forward. Oh, it's still stopping a bit. It's almost immediately putting on the brakes. So why would it be immediately getting the brakes put on? There's, I mean, yeah, friction and bounce, that doesn't matter. But I would expect that whatever speed this is flying out, this would have to be continuing to move forward. Uh-oh, look, our axis started moving. Why is our axis moving? Why? Without the damping, it might be forcing these boxes to start moving along with the wind, which should only be affecting part of it, but it's no longer counteracting it. So that moves forward, which is making that move forward the equivalent amount that the axis is, because you can see our little box in the corner is moving forward, and that is happening because we're not constantly draining out a bunch of the energy that would affect those. Now, why don't we make a friction, and I'm going to steal this giant box field and put it into the friction. And let's go ahead and make this thing nice and big, 10,000, and we'll make that 1,000 and 1,000. I mean, it's not that big. Let's go 5,000, 5,000. Now there's all this space here, but it's still way, like these other ones on the outside, they're still really, really, really far away. So given that, I'm going to tell this box field to affect friction, and we're going to have a really strong friction, and I'm going to tell the box field to invert. So it's the opposite. So that friction should be stopping those outer boxes from moving now. So if I hit play, the hope is that these will barely move, which means our axis will barely move. And there should be zero friction applying to our overall object. So curiously, so now the ribbon is being forced to fly out from that wind. But okay, still some weirdness. But I mean, considering what we're experiencing here, it's not necessarily surprising. There's no turbulence. There's no counter wind. No linear damping. No drag or lift. And you'll see that we're losing pretty much all of our energy right away. The stuff flies out. It ribbons a little bit, and then just kind of stops. It just is barely move forward. I would kind of expect this entire thing to move forward at a constant rate. But instead, it seems like the energy gets drained out of it. Like, energy is getting drained out of it instantly. This is so weird. This is very weird. Like, why does that energy suddenly dissipate so quickly if it's outside of the wind? It should carry on its momentum. I'm going to save this again. Let's save another version, and we'll strip down a bunch of things. We don't need any turbulence. We don't want that wind. Don't want the secondary wind. Signal's not doing anything. We'll delete that. I'm just eliminating variables here. We've got the counter friction, and this friction should be affecting everything outside of its giant box. And we've got these 4 boxes, and those are just stopping that from wiggling away. And we just got one wind at full power blowing forward if you're inside of it. Let's go back to our dynamics. In our dynamics, we're draining energy out through springs. So I wonder if that is something. That'd be weird. But you can see this is flying out, and then suddenly, boom, like all this energy is being drained. It starts wiggling through the air. But there's no turbulence here. There's no noise introduced at any part in the process. So that's pretty weird to me. Now, out of curiosity, let's get rid of all the dampings. Woo! Look at that. Okay. Now, when those fly forward, it appears, okay, interesting, this is good to know. With everything else being equal, it appears that damping drains energy out of the system as well. So, I mean, I always knew that it drained energy out of the system, but I didn't think it would drain momentum out. But it seems like the momentum is turning in to like shear energy and flexion energy and structural energy. And that's where it's draining. So now you see they're flying out, and they're continuing to fly at the same speed. This is more what I was expecting. It's still a little bit weird how they're kind of folding up on each other, but at least they're maintaining their speed. Whoa! Exploded. But that's interesting. Interesting. I'm not sure what to... I'm not sure what to do about that. And we could reintroduce turbulence again. So let's go steal our turbulence from our previous file. Turbulence. Paste it in here. Oops. Well, weird. There we go. Okay, paste the turbulence in. Now this should be a little bit turbulent, so this should be constantly... Oh, yeah. So this is adding energy to the system, but now we need the damping. So we are trying to, let's do some minimal damping. Turn off the turbulence again. Minimal damping. Go out, and yeah, okay, still a lot of energy gets drained just from 5%, 5%, 5%. Like 5% of the energy is getting drained all the time. Man, that's interesting. It'd be great if we could do linear damping, so added energy, but that's not the case. So the ribbon starts coming out. That's doing its thing. Now let's add in our turbulence. And the turbulence is now adding new energy into the scene, constantly adding it in. So while this is going to lose its forward momentum, this is going to be adding in our turbulence so that there should be some purely random motion being introduced everywhere. The cubes have a lot of friction, so those should be getting slowed down. But yeah, now the turbulence is able to introduce new motion overall. All right, well, it's something. I mean, I wanted to plow through here because I felt like we were constantly gaining new information. And now I've got a better understanding of at least this bounding box idea, where like when you saw the bounding box moving forward, however much that moved forward is forcing everything to move forward with that amount of energy. And now we've gotten around that, which is very interesting. So we can maintain our forward momentum by adding in less damping. So now they should fly out and have more energy. Very crazy energy. Wow, okay, well, big difference between 1% and 5% apparently. And now let's add in our damping or drag. Okay, boom, lots of drag. And lift. Most interesting. Start getting these snarls inside of that. The turbulence, we've introduced turbulence, which is everywhere. So this is a cool thing. You see, I've got this wind with a box field inside of it, but I can go to my turbulence field to say that you also get the box wind, but I want you to invert your result. So this should be... I don't even have to copy the box field. I can use the same box field and invert it. So now hopefully there's no turbulence inside of there. And I mean, we did see a little snarl kind of happen, but yeah, it's interesting. I really don't want those snarls coming up, but we are getting nice bunched up ribbon coming out of here now. So it's something. Okay. Well, I mean, at this point, we're back to the point where it's like, okay, I feel like we're in control and we can tinker some more, putting really strong shear and flexion in here. Even though there's not much energy, it should try and create larger loops in general. Like these loops want to be bigger. It's interesting. Interesting. I mean, I think we're getting really nice looking ribbon now. So when it comes to this dynamic stuff, I really, really, really want to understand it. So that's cool. Interesting. Wow. I mean, my whole marine is filled with like bizarre, like it's weirdness there, man. Now we get these snarls early on. I feel like we could probably counteract those a little bit by putting a little bit of a linear fall off in there as well. Like if I make a duplicate of this box field, and then we'll make this one a full fall off, and we'll make it linear and make that 10,000, except it really just got to be 5,000 because for some reason it makes everything twice the length. And that's 10,000, but it's supposed to be 5,000. Or it needs to be 5,000. So now we get that linear field. So now we can go to our box field and put the linear field in, and I can multiply on top of it. So if I if this blows in the correct direction, which I might have the linear field backwards, it should be a lot stronger on this end than that one, which should kind of prevent snarls. It's constantly tugging harder on one end than the other is my theory on that. So let's see. Although, guessing on the way this is bunching up, I did it backwards. So this linear field, Z plus, hit play. So that should have almost no power. But over here, we got lots of full power. Whee! And the hope here is that we get less, the entire point of that is we should get less snarls in there. And yeah, indeed, it does seem like we're not really getting much in the way of snarls. So those are all flinging out at a nice big overall speed. Very nice. Now, we do get some of these that are like overshooting. I'm not sure why we get extra power there. It might just be the way the wind is catching, or maybe this drag is slowing it down. So I guess there's some additional variables to keep in mind there. Adding a little bit of linear damping might actually go a long way now that it's behaving a little bit more as expected, but I feel like small numbers are going to have a big effect now. Yeah, so that's slowing that down. That's interesting because that still shoots out with that crazy ribbon. Now, I like the way it looks, and I mean, I don't even think it's necessarily wrong. I'm just a little curious why. Why suddenly it'll be like, oh, a big cluster of these will shoot forward with a lot of power, and then it'll start drifting. Not quite sure about that, but it's neat. And then, I mean, we were doing a lot of this with the context where this was not self-colliding. So if we turn on self-collisions, I did just hit save just in case, because it could start dramatically slowing down as these actually collide with each other. It is slowing down a lot, but it's not insane. But now these are actually hitting each other. So now they should be actually tangling in knots and whatnot. And some of them shouldn't be able to shoot through quite as well. And now it is just this wind blowing to stop them. And yeah, we're getting this bigger cluster, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, look at these drifting around in the wind. Like, they shouldn't be colliding anymore. They're twisting around really nicely. We should be able to create a subdivision surface and even just set that to 1-1 and throw the ribbon in there. Yeah, we'll just take the result and put the entire thing in there because we don't need the subdivided version running. Hopefully that doesn't break it. Sometimes it doesn't like subdivision surface, and in this case, it does not seem to. How do we subdivide if it doesn't like it? I don't know. A thought that pops into my head. I don't know if this is any good, but we could make a matrix object. This might be a bad idea. If we make a matrix, stop making a cloner. If I make a matrix object and I set it to object mode, and I make the object, let me save it again. Make the object the ribbon, and then I clone onto the polygon center. It should be making one matrix per center point, and then we can put that. Make a tracer object. I'm going to tell it to trace the matrix and connect all elements, and now we can hide the original. And actually, that's not going to work. It's not going to work because as I connect all elements, it's yeah, connect all elements. What's probably going to happen is those. If I zoom out, you see we've got this nice line here, but if I zoom out, my thought is that this bottom point is probably shooting out and creating clones on the outside ones, although visually it doesn't really seem to be. That's interesting. Don't trace the vertices. But it's not, this is seemingly not blowing forward. Weirdness, super weird things are happening. So how do we subdivide that? I mean, we could put a subpoly on it, maybe. Put that on there. Turn on displacement, and we'll feed it a displacement of a beautiful middle gray, so it goes nowhere and displaces none, but it does have a subpoly displacement of 1 with round geometry. And now, with any luck, when we send that to the picture viewer, it would be subdivided, which is actually a pretty good way of doing it because it's going to take less time to calculate in the viewport. Output, all frames. All right. There's no lighting or anything, but I don't think we need it. If we hit render, I guess we see those boxes, and I don't want to. Render. And we got this white material. That's fine. And now let's frame it like that, and then send it to the picture viewer. And this should come flying out. Oh, it's not seemingly subdividing. No, it's not. Wow, this part of it's being a little bit of a pain in the butt, isn't it? It's neat, but it's not subdivided. Why? What is even happening here? Let's do a. Okay, my last thought is, what if we bake it? And it's going to take a little bit. Let's just do the first couple frames. Let's do 120 frames worth. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's plenty. So let's bake. Shouldn't take too long to do that shorter sequence. Down. And then as soon as that's baked, I'm pretty sure we can put it into a subdivision surface. There's a lot of little bizarre things in it, though. JM, while I agree you can subdivide at render time in other render engines, we can subdivide at render time in Cinema 4D as well. So the reason it's, whatever reason it's not, all right, well, that's all coming out nicely there. But can we now put that into a subdivision surface? Look, it just disappears. But if I move my mouse over the screen, it seems to reappear. So, yeah, look at that. See how it's even kind of showing it here? And it doesn't show it, but if I pause it and then see it, it does work. So let's see if it actually renders. Let's go ahead and just put a sky so we have something to see. And let's make this white with some wide, tall, specular. Give it a little something. Go! There we go. Subdivided. I don't know why we had to bake it, though. So yeah, even right now, like, this wind is really strong. There's nothing to blow it up specifically. We just have the overall wind going so that it doesn't separate, or the overall turbulence going. So it's a little strong, but at least it's behaving itself. This is behaving logically. I was still a little curious why it kind of does this little cluster up and it pushes. My assumption is that that is happening because of the drag, like the drag and lift, where it's like, oh, it's suddenly angled upward and slows down. But some of them are shooting forward, and those don't. So yeah, we'd have to do some tweaks there. But we're almost an hour over. I was really curious about kind of pushing through and forcing that to work, because I really want to understand how and why dynamics work. And that one was not cooperating. So it was important to kind of plow through and force it. So yeah, that should be good. Thank you, everybody who actually stuck around for the entire time. I know some people had to go. But it was an interesting question. I do like finding out more details about the stuff. And it was interesting that my theory about the axis moving actually did seem to be the problem. Like, I don't want to call this a bug, but it could just be the way that the dynamics are written, or maybe the way that Maxon wrote the code to implement the bullet dynamic system could be what is creating these issues. It's pretty interesting one way or the other. In any case, thank you so much. I want to go ahead and do a quick thank you to Andrew Baker because he has been helping me make sure that Cinema 4D wasn't flickering by fixing video card settings, and I know he's going to be watching on YouTube later, so thank you very much. I want to do a quick shout out. And then I also want to thank the great Wanderer Studios for their specific support on Patreon, which is awesome. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, I want to go and hit the go button on this little thing. So thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you on the Slack channel. Head on over to rocketlassoslack.com if you're not already on there, and you should be able to jump on in. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much. Toodaloo.